Oh, baby. We got a juicy little peach of an episode today. We actually, my guest professor no, not a guest, but I've been listening to enough English podcasts that they're always like, with me today is professor of, but yeah, it's just us.
Professor of hydroponics. Mm-hmm. Is that what we're doing today? Is this our first naval battle solo episode?
I mean, outside of World War II, probably.
Yeah, outside of World War II, then I think we had Salamis when we were talking about the Greeks and maybe the Achaemenid Empire.
Yeah.
But we're going to be solely focused. The bulk of this battle that we're talking about, that's not even called a battle, somehow it's just the Spanish Armada. Everything's taking place on water. And even when they try to run to land, they can't get to land because there's a bunch of Dutch people blocking them, so they have to stay on the water.
So the Spanish Armada refers to the actual Spanish Navy, which I believe Spain still refers to it as the Spanish Armada.
Cool.
But more so now, if you're talking about the Spanish Armada, it's referring to this event, which took place, I think it was began in May of 1588, or at least planning and getting everything together. And it's essentially just a mission of conquest to actually take over England by Spain.
It just wasn't well thought out.
No. And like many of you, you probably first heard of the Spanish Armada from watching Billy Madison when Veronica Vaughn, that hot piece of ace, was telling him what it was. I don't remember if he got the date right, though.
I don't think he ever hit it because she started putting her clothes back on, and then he freaked out.
God, give me the answer.
Yeah,
and then he gets it right with Chris
1980s.
Farley, right? He's like, that is correct.
Yep, then it's Chris Farley. He might get it with Chris Farley. That might be the first one that he gets with Chris Farley.
I think it is. But, I mean, this episode, the build-up to this is almost as good as the actual, battle itself. And this one took me on a deep dive into... I like the World War II naval stuff. It's kind of lighter when it comes to World War I, but this in itself, just getting to dive in and find out all the nuts and bolts about the differences in the ships, the methods, the tactics, all that kind of stuff. When all is said and done, you just look at this and you're just like, England kind of had to win. There was no way that they could have lost this.
If they did, the world would be a much different place.
It's true.
Yeah, that's... the thought of the ramifications for what it was. And when we're talking about an English win, we're not talking that they wiped the floor with the Spanish. We'll talk about what the actual most dangerous things in this war actually were. Mm-hmm. But it was just enough for the English to kind of start to slap together what they wanted as a navy. And then once they do end up defeating the Spanish, you see almost this confidence build in the English Navy that brings them to just superiority on the water.
This is at a time when, episodes that we've talked about the British Empire, it's always been about, their holdings over in North America, over in China, over in Indochina and all that area, India. This is at a time when England is just England. And they're just maybe controlling a little bit of the area around them, maybe a little bit across the channel. But this is well before that thing becomes an empire. In fact, they're still fighting Scotland, even at this point. So they're still handling a whole bunch of stuff back home. And this really kind of serves, if you're looking back in history and saying, where did England kind of set its mark as a naval power and where did they build off of from? I do feel like it's the Spanish Armada.
It's a pretty good jumping off point for them to just kind of change their ranking in Europe and the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, remember, rate, review, subscribe, 5 stars where you can spare them. I'm Professor Chris. That's Professor Adam. And let's get into the Spanish Armada. Okay, much like we do in every episode, we're going to go ahead and explain the backstory to this because you got to figure out why Spain is even wanting to take over England. aside from just the normal European reasons for invading countries like they do all the time.
And for all you folks that really enjoyed our monarchy episode, the first episode, the part 1, part 2 will be coming. It's a lot, okay? We definitely enjoy it, but it's a lot of trying to go through the same names. Mm-hmm. If you like that, you're going to love the first 45 minutes of this, because we're just doing this with basically the Habsburgs, the Tudors, and then we're doing a little bit of the Portuguese.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the mid to late 1400s, which is the 15th century, Henry VII and Ferdinand II of Spain, Henry VII of England, end up entering into kind of an alliance against, I believe it was Louis XI of France. And this is kind of a common occurrence throughout European history, is when you have like 3 major players, it's always the 2 weaker ones will join to an alliance just to keep the larger one in check.
It's a triangle of hard feelings.
That's what it is, because then when England becomes powerful, like Spain's looking over at France being like, hey, are we hooking up at this point? They're like, I guess so. So this is when France is actually kind of in power at this point, and kind of the dominant political and military power in Europe. England and Spain do some intermarriage where they're able to, solidify a little bit more than just a handshake as far as the deal goes. They're sending some people over there. They're sending people over to England. And by the mid 50s or 1500s, the 16th century, this is where we get the Habsburgs kind of making their mark in Spain.
Yeah, and the Habsburgs get their start. Austria, we decided, was kind of their main jumping off point. They're up into the Holy Roman Empire. They're going to move their way down into the Spanish Empire, who will take over the Portuguese Empire. The Habsburgs are just spreading their oats pretty much everywhere they can get a foothold.
Those fucking weird-ass noses are popping up all over Europe.
Yep, we got funny-looking chins and funny-looking noses to this day because of the Habsburgs. Also, kind of, I guess, a third of the way into the 16th century, we have Henry VIII, a Tudor, declaring the Acts of Supremacy, which established Henry as the head of the Church of England, which is the Protestant Reformation, or I guess this is the English Reformation, a part of the wider Protestant Reformation, where King Henry VIII could not get a son from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, goes to the Pope, says, hey, Pope on a rope, I need a little help here. She can't have a boy. I need a boy for the line of succession. What do we do about this? And the Pope's like, if God doesn't want you to have a son, you're just not going to have a son.
Well, hold on, my child. Hold on, Henry. How many children have you currently had with your wife?
1. I have a daughter who's survived infancy.
Okay. So, I mean, there's still time, and she's obviously able to have children, so you could keep trying for a boy. Man, Henry's a dirty dog. I think Henry was like, listen, if I'm going to be honest with you, Padre, I'm getting sick of it, if you know what I'm saying. I'm the king. King's got a king. And I feel like you should be able to offer some type of maybe like an annulment or something like this. And the Pope is like, yeah, we don't do that here. That's not something. If we let you do it, then we got to let every ruler do it. And it's going to, cause all kinds of shit. So what does Henry do? It's like, well, if the church isn't going to let me do this, I guess I got to find my own religious movement that's going to allow me to just divorce at will.
Then he starts playing the church Price is Right. Mm-hmm. He's doing Plinko and he's dropping pucks.
Yeah.
He's got the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking at it. He's like, oh, Islam, religion, divorce, probably not allowed there.
Hindu, Buddhism, what have I heard about?
Judaism, not a fan.
What are they doing over like in Holland and the Netherlands and stuff like that?
There is the Germanic people that started this Protestant Reformation. It's still Christian. We still got our God is the head.
I do remember a guy in my court telling me that he was on his 4th wife and that he was able to divorce them. Okay, I think that's what we're going to do.
And all of England becomes Protestant. And as all of England becomes Protestant, Catherine of Aragon is then kicked to the curb after having a child, Mary I, for the second wife, Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn can only bear a daughter past infancy, and this is where we get Elizabeth I.
So Catherine of Aragon is a Spanish royal. So she's someone that was sent over from Spain to solidify this. Essentially, Spain has a direct royal in the action as the queen.
Yep.
At this point.
Catherine of Aragon is the child of the Prince of Aragon and the the Princess of
Something.
Somewhere else in Spain that actually unites the Iberian Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
So we get the parents that united the Iberian Peninsula to bear a child that is then sent over to England to be married to Henry VIII.
So kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
this is not just somebody who's the cousin of the king or something like that. This has got to rub Spain the wrong way as well, because they're like, dude, we literally sent you like our daughter. Yep. And now you're going to marry someone else, meaning that now we do not, because I guess we don't, you're going to marry another one of our daughters? Probably not. You're looking for somebody else. We now don't have that tie. We're not, our child or the child that is of Spain as well is not going to be the next ruler.
We lost our foothold.
Yeah.
We lost our foothold into your family.
Mm-hmm. So the church is pissed. Spain's not happy, but Henry's going to do what he does.
Yep.
And ends up marrying, I believe it was the second wife.
Yeah, Anne Boleyn. We were just talking about her. Elizabeth I. No sons. Why did Henry VIII divorce Catherine of Aragon? He needs a son.
How many kids did he have with Anne Boleyn?
One that survived infancy.
Okay.
Elizabeth.
And then he was also banging Anne Boleyn's sister, I believe was one of his known mistresses. And at that point, too, what if the sister has a son? Do they just play a little switcheroo situation where they're like, actually, Anne had this kid?
If they're both pregnant in similar times and you just keep them both in court.
Is that what he was telling Anne and the sister? He's like, listen, I got to do this because, listen, if you don't bear a boy or she doesn't bear a boy, you saw what happened with the first wife.
Yeah, probably. You want to be pushing that.
But Anne is also one of the ones that gets beheaded as well.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's an unceremonious sin for Anne. I'm sure the third wife, after hearing that the second wife was beheaded and the first wife divorced, Jane Seymour was real pumped to get in bed with Henry VIII. Not
to be confused with of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman fame, or Still Looking Hot in Wedding Crashers. This is a different Jane Seymour. She's still timeless.
Yeah.
But
Jane's luck changes. And when I say Jane's luck changes, it means that Henry was actually able to produce a boy with a woman, because we know that the Y chromosome is dependent on the man. Jane Seymour ends up bearing Edward VI. Edward VI, finally Henry's heir. Does that stop the line of marriages for this man?
No. He ends up marrying a total of 6 times. And those are marriages. That's not counting how many mistresses and everything like that he had.
Yep. He had, what was it? It was 3
Catherines, 2 Annes, and a Jane.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were beheaded. Yeah. So you get Jane Seymour. Jane has Jane is Edward VI.
Mother.
The direct heir at this point now is mother. And I mean, Henry kind of got him, not really in like the nick of time as far as that goes, but by the time that Henry dies in 1547, Edward is only 9 years old.
Yeah.
So he had him back in that would make it 1538. Yeah, I just subtracted 9 from when he dies.
Okay.
So
after the Acts of Supremacy, he only had 4 years?
Yeah, I believe so.
Jeez.
So the way that once Henry is... Do you have anything else on Henry before I move on from...
just how the line is going to go. So the line of succession now will be set at Edward being the son, taking his role as king, Edward VI. If Edward VI passes away without having a legitimate male heir, it will revert back to his actual first wife. So we have Protestant Edward.
Oldest child of the first marriage.
Yep.
Which just happens to be Mary.
Mary, coming from the first Catholic marriage, is Catholic.
Okay. It's fucking soap opera-y. So Henry is sticking with the Protestant thing because it allows him to basically just divorce at will. And apparently behead wives as well. So the first wife is obviously Catholic.
Yep.
Because she came from Spain, which means after Henry ditches her mom, this girl's just got to be pissed off at her dad and is like, I'm fucking sticking with Catholic too. Second wife, I'm not quite sure exactly. She was also Protestant,
for sure.
which Henry was probably like, I got to have a Protestant wife if I'm going to be pitching this thing.
Well, it's the national religion of England. So if you're going to be an English woman, you better be Protestant.
And then Jane also being Protestant as well. So when Henry VI ends up coming and getting
Edward VI.
Sorry, I got to get my Henrys and Edwards together. We're done with Henry anyway. So Edward VI is crowned at the age of 9, January 1547. He's down with the Reformation. He stays with it. He's also 9 years old, so he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Yeah. It's just the people that are his handlers and everything like that are just like, stick with what your father's doing.
Can't even spell Protestant.
Yep. He ends up dying in 1553. He dies at 12 years old. I just now realized that. I wrote the dates and it didn't even click for me. Of course he's going to die fucking childless. How did I not notice this? Am I getting my dates right?
1553, yeah. He hadn't even probably figured out yanking it yet, really, to get to the point of...
No kidding. Oh, man.
Yeah, died in 1553.
Eddie. And you just know he's the king. He never got to enjoy the royal delights.
No.
Okay. So just like you said, line of succession now ends up going back to the first child, or only child in this situation, of the first wife, happens to be Mary the First, crowned 1553. She ends up marrying, and of course she's Catholic because she has daddy issues and she's pissed off at the Reformation.
How funny is that's her rebellion? Her to be rebellious against her father is to just stay Catholic.
Well, hold on. What does she go and do that's even more of a statement?
Yeah, that's a good point. Basically, the whole entire English court was like, hey, you can be Catholic. We're going to find you a nice, sweet English boy who's going to be Protestant.
You got the church doing the thing. It's the meme where the guy's looking around the corner and like having his hands rubbing. Yep. As soon as Mary gets into power, the church is just like, oh, you motherfuckers are Catholic again.
We'll be back.
Mm-hmm. We're back. We're back.
Mary goes ahead and says, no, I don't think that's really what I'm looking for in life. I'd like to find a nice Catholic man to marry for myself. And she ends up running into Philip II, who is the son of Charles V. Now, Charles can be Charles V, Charles I, or Charles II, depending on where it is. He becomes the Holy Roman Empire in 1519.
Holy Roman Emperor?
Holy Roman Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Empire, fuck. Before that, he's the King of Spain, 1516. He becomes the Archduke of Austria in 1519. So he is the first Charles in Austria. He's the second Charles in Rome, and he's the fifth Charles in Spain.
How confusing is this when you're living in these different countries and someone else comes into your country and they're calling him King Charles VI, and you're like, he's Charles II. And some guys in the background going, he's Charles I.
Yeah, there's just arguments about what Charles he is. Mm-hmm. He's a member of what we were just talking about, the Habsburgs. He has two sons of note, Philip II and Ferdinand I. Again, we're talking about a Habsburg, so they're all going to be Catholic. Philip II ends up falling for Mary I.
Falling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a way in. I'm sure this was probably something that they had talked about. Mary's looking for a Catholic stronghold to try to pair up with.
Correct. And you got to imagine that the church is sitting there in Charles's ear being like, you got a son, Mary's in control, make this shit happen.
Yeah. And they end up pushing it through. But there's kind of an issue because there's this succession debate that arises. Philip is the king of Spain, or would be the king of Spain, I guess the king of Spain in waiting. They end up hashing out a deal that says that Philip would retain any previous possessions upon Mary's death, back to being Catholic, so there is no divorce at this point in time.
Is this a royal prenup?
It's kind of what it feels like. Their child would ascend to the throne. If there are no children, then the throne will revert back to Protestant Elizabeth I, who is the second wife and Boleyn's only child.
And they do not want this to happen.
Ew.
This is worst case scenario for them. So Mary's crowned 1553. Mary's Philip II of Spain, who is at that time prince in waiting to be king. He comes over. You said he's living in England for a while, correct?
Yep.
Getting the lay of the land. He's going to be technically the king of England And right now, he is the king of England. By marrying her, he's the king of England before he's the king of Spain.
Yep.
Okay.
Just a little bit of foreshadowing here. There was something in the, I guess, English government that was called a warrant dormant. And basically, this was a line item in the government's fiscal checkbook that says we will be able to divert, I believe it was like a couple $1,000s to shipbuilding. The belief at this point in time...
Naval shipbuilding. Merchants were still paying for their own shit, everything like that.
At this point in time, being connected to Spain, England is thinking that the next time that they're challenged on a large scale, obviously is going to be from France, right? So Mary is talking to Philip, saying, what do you think we should do? Philip offers the advice of, if you're building big ships that can sit in the channel and have a ton of firepower, anybody that's going to be coming from mainland France isn't going to be able to cross the channel.
I like to imagine Philip is just like a trust fund kid. And so he's over there and Mary's like, okay, I mean, what are we doing here? And Philip's looking around and he's like, my dad has a lot of boats. I know that, he talks about boats all the time. So you should probably put some more money into boats. And she's like, okay, I guess we'll put more. I mean, we're an island. Yeah. So we should probably be able to put some money into our Navy and protect ourselves.
But they're just building these giant channel boats because they're thinking that the push is going to come from France.
I also think there's probably a little bit of a, hey, when we decide as Spain, which this is also going to be a part of, not Spain, but, as part of the empire, I guess. If we go to war with somebody, we want to have your resources to also call upon. But then I wonder if there's also a little bit in his head about like, you know what? I retract that statement. I don't think it ever occurred to him based on where Spain was at the time, going across normally, basically having a highway over to the Americas, bringing over all that gold. I don't think he ever saw England potentially as being a threat, even if he helped out, in helping to construct their navy or helping to build it up at all.
Yeah, not at all. I don't think that this was any sort of planning in mind or anything like this, but it is kind of interesting. The guy that launches the Spanish Armada on England had some say in the ships that were being built in England. So this goes on building these kind of large channel ships to protect from the mainland up until 1578. And again, we'll jump back and forth here. This is just to kind of finish off this interesting buildup for the English. In 1578, John Hawkins goes and talks to Queen Elizabeth I and says, hey, I know that you keep renewing this warrant dormant every single year to build these boats. I believe we can build a better boat. And she says, okay. So from 1578 to 1588, they start building these things called race-built battleships.
Galleons.
Is that what a galleon is?
Race-built galleons.
And those are going to be more sails. They are going to be smaller, so they're more maneuverable.
Yeah, I got a
firepower is 10x. I'm ready for that soon.
I'm not ready to get into it yet.
But there's kind of this shift where even if Philip was trying to botch whatever England has going on, John Hawkins, the guy who's going to come up in this episode a lot later on, was able to kind of have a different mind about maybe what Great Britain needed. Or I guess England at the time.
So we still have to go back a little bit and talk about Mary and Philip. But I think what he looked at, what John Hawkins was looking at, is when, Philip was over there obviously had to be a lot of ships coming in from Spain. There was trade going on, all that stuff. John Hawkins is looking at this, probably did sail on a few Spanish or Portuguese ships, something like that. And as someone that was like well-versed or had an eye for this kind of stuff, he's like, man, these things are kind of like just looking at all the disadvantages that they might have.
Giant tall.
Yeah. And then goes back and goes to, Elizabeth, who's then queen at that time, and says, this is the Spanish Armada. This is the Spanish Empire. We can't fight the same way that they can. I feel like we could develop tactics based on the way that we want to build these new race-built galleons that we're not going to have to fight the kind of fight that they can easily beat us in. And so he's kind of the guy, I think, that really shifts the direction that's going to be essentially the biggest advantage that the English have going into the actual Spanish Armada, like the battles that take place during it.
For sure. to get back to our sweet family love story of Mary and Philip, Charles V ends up abdicating the throne. He hands Spain off to Philip. He hands the Holy Roman Empire off to Ferdinand in 1556. At this point in time, Philip is going to take a step back from his King of England duties because now he's the King of Spain. And if we're being honest, in the job title hierarchy, the King of Spain means a whole lot more than being the King of England at this point.
Weather-wise, you got to imagine the south of Spain or anywhere in Spain is going to be a little bit more desirable. When Mary decided to bring back England back into the Catholic fold, around 260 people were burned at the stake at various times, not like a big bonfire, but it earned her the nickname Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary.
During Philip and her's marriage, he basically convinces her to go to war with, not to go to war against Spain, but to come to war with Spain against France.
And the Catholic Church, who is backing France.
Exactly. And so she's like, yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to war. So they go to war. And what ends up happening is Spain kind of takes a step back and lets England kind of bear the brunt of it, which they end up technically winning. But at the same time, okay, the coalition of Spain and England win.
Yeah. Well, they signed a peace treaty.
Correct. England loses, though, in the sense that France is able to pretty much take all of these English holdings that they had in France and holdings that England had had for like 500 years. Because remember, who came over from
Norman France?
It was, the Normans.
Yeah.
Ended up coming over. So they had held areas in France for 500 years. So they end up losing those areas, and it ends up being this huge, like, hit to essentially the coffers of England because they had all of this money coming out of like Calais and all of these ports where all of these, all of this shipping was coming in where they were able to basically get taxes out of.
Well, they lost the only foothold to mainland Europe when they lost Calais.
Yeah.
That was the last place that they had, which doesn't seem like a massive deal because you're still going to be trading with France. But just like you said, when you control Calais and you can push all of your goods there, you're not going to be taxed at the port in Calais to sell stuff.
And now you're
Europe.
buying stuff at French prices.
Exactly.
However much, and you just made them sign a treaty. You're not getting any discounts.
Yeah, and that sort of just this big switch that happens in 1559 with the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis. It just kind of changes everything because Habsburg Spain is going to grow while England shrunk down. But there was never any look between Philip or Mary where Mary's like, what the fuck, dude? You signed us up for this and this happens?
I don't think she was in a position to do that because at that point now it's like, fuck, all we have is this island and he's got all of this territory. If he wants to come, the marriage is keeping this thing together. I better keep this thing civil because this marriage is the only thing keeping them currently out of England.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mary didn't even get to see that because before the peace that ends up being signed, Mary ends up dying in 1558.
Yeah, it's no longer Mary's problem. She no longer has to worry about this the problem with Spain.
There is a problem, though. She died without bearing a child.
Oh, no, Bloody Mary died without having a kid. Enter Elizabeth #1. Elizabeth Lizzie Uno. She's crowned in 1558. She is the daughter of Henry and his second wife, Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, you're right. Second wife.
So she is a Protestant reformist. She's down with that, like Edward was, and basically starts steering England again away from the church.
Before she does that, Philip made a very nice offer to Elizabeth. He offered to bed Elizabeth and marry her to keep the union together. And Protestant Elizabeth, I'm sure, kindly refused this Catholic gentleman's advances.
How old was he at that time, I wonder?
Well, I don't know if he could have been that much older than Elizabeth because Elizabeth and Mary weren't separated by a whole lot of years at birth.
Oh, no, they weren't. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And they still couldn't have even been that old because, again, they weren't that much younger than Edward that died when he was like 12. So we're talking about young people that are in charge of a lot of this stuff. And Elizabeth goes on to be queen for freaking ever. Like a very, very long time.
He was only 31, and she was like, nah, get your weird nose and your dick away and your Catholic dick away from me. So Elizabeth ends up coming in. She starts steering England away and back toward the Protestant Reformation, or just toward that as their main religion again. And because she turns down Philip, he's like, well, she's got to go. So there was also...
Hilarious.
Yeah. There was also a segment of people in England. They're always going to support somebody else that has a claim to the throne through some type of, relativity or whatever. So he basically wants Liz out, and he's like, oh, we got Mary, Queen of Scots. She'll go ahead and be in the Catholic camp. I bet I can actually marry this bitch. I'm going to go ahead and try to get her in power. And there's all of a sudden like all these attempts on Liz's life. Of course, some of them are being backed by other things, but I'm sure Philip really isn't like, hey guys, stop trying to kill her. So Elizabeth ends up getting sick of all this shit. And he's like, the only reason these things are happening is because they think Mary, Queen of Scots, can actually ascend to the throne.
And she had a claim. She had just as legitimate of a claim, I believe, as Elizabeth did.
But guess what you can't do from jail or from prison? Can't ascend to the throne from prison. So she basically imprisons Mary, Queen of Scots in 1567. And that kind of, there's still a little bit of jawing, but that kind of silences some stuff.
Yeah, well, and at the same time, Philip is not only trying to get Elizabeth killed, he's also going through and backing all of these revolts that are going on in Ireland. Mm-hmm. Because we're talking just along the Ireland episodes, these are the revolts that are coming up that Spain, actually was backing the Irish Catholics up to try to fight against this the Protestant English. 1578, just clearing up a little bit of Habsburg Spain at this point in time. There is a succession crisis in Portugal that starts when King Sebastian dies at war at the age of 24. He dies in war at the age of 24 without a descendant. The family would just go into this full battle where it was Sebastian's grand uncle who would revert to taking the kingship.
They're digging deep for people.
Yeah, and he was actually a priest who had taken his holy orders before he had a child. He doesn't have any children. He ends up dying 2 years later. There is a swath of grandchildren who are actually Sebastian's nieces and nephews that start fighting for this throne. King Antonio ends up coming out on top. During this whole battle for the succession crisis, the Council of Governors in Portugal ends up fleeing to Spain. They meet with Philip. Philip basically says, hey, if you guys want to back me as the King of Portugal, as I take it and completely unite the Iberian Peninsula and get all of your guys' resources, I'll make sure that you have cushy jobs. Board of Governors comes back to Portugal.
I won't kill you.
Yeah, that's probably more the cushy jobs than just,
you get to remain living.
You.
Probably get to keep their land and shit like that.
True. So as soon as they come back in, they say, we want Philip to come down here and unite the Iberian Peninsula. Philip comes down and just wipes out any Antonio loyalists and unites the kingdoms of Portugal and the kingdoms of Spain into one Habsburg Empire. And we're talking about the two main naval powers that actually had to have the treaty signed by the Pope, designating the longitude in which the Spanish are entitled to go into and the longitude in which the Portuguese are entitled to go into, because that's how Spain ends up with South America, Central America, and the west coast of the United States.
The very top of South America. And Portugal ends up with essentially all of Brazil.
Yeah, because that longitudinal line cuts off Brazil enough, and then Portugal has all of Asia.
I love the fact that the Pope just had to basically, it's like two brothers that are fighting, and the Pope just gets pissed off like the mom and is just roll the duct tape and just duct tapes down. Don't fucking cross this line.
The Pope doesn't know what longitude is. That has to be somebody else to tell him that.
Yeah. And then you also get, with the acquisition not only of the land of Portugal, but you're acquiring the Portuguese Navy, which, because again, they have these ocean-going vessels and everything. They're pulling all of these resources out of South America. When you have both Spain and Portugal that are used to making these long journeys. It takes ships that are able to do that, but not only to carry lots of cargo, to make long journeys, you have to be able to protect those ships. So you would have these galleons that are basically, like you're saying, kind of the battleships of the time, but their goal was almost like a transport and as an auxiliary to be able to defend themselves. If you're sailing all the way to, and especially once Portugal and Spain kind of come together, not really willingly on one of their sides, when you're out there in the open ocean or you're over in, South America, Central America, that area, if someone's going to come and try to rob your treasure fleet, 10 ships that are being escorted back and they've got one or two of these, military galleons with them, pirates can maybe get together one or two ships, lighter boats as well. They're not sailing these galleons. It doesn't make attacking these ships, these treasure fleets, feasible. So you don't have to really have any other tactic. And this is why what's going to come into play during the Spanish Armada, their tactics are like, well, people are just normally scared of us because we have these huge ships and they can't take them on. So there's never really any change that Portugal or Spain have to make to their navies because they're like, this is working. The kind of ships we have right now, they are doing every single thing we want to do. They're bringing back treasure like fucking crazy.
Yep.
Keep it going. No changes.
Not worried about learning boxing. We're not worried about learning jiu-jitsu or learning judo. We have this one jiu-jitsu move where we fire on a ship.
It's won me every fight I've been in.
Yeah. We fire on a ship. As soon as we fire on the ship and catch them off guard.
Let's not talk about that yet. That's tactic talk.
All right. So at this point in time, the Spanish holdings after the Iberian Peninsula or the Iberian Union, it was huge. I can't do this all in one breath. So all in total, they had all of South America, all of Mexico, all of Central America, all of the Iberian Peninsula, all of the Caribbean islands, Florida, the Netherlands, Naples, Sicily, and Milan, all in Italy. They had enclaves in the African coast. They had the Philippines, which was named after King Philip II. They had the coastal territories in India. They had Maluku Islands in Indonesia. They had Macau in China. This was known as the, what was it? The
King Philip was the first ruler to rule over an empire in which the sun did not set, is how they stated, which, think about it logically, when the sun is setting in one place because they control places over in, North America, South America, that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, they had, every single hemisphere had a Spanish influence in it.
Which that leads you, that just drives the point home even more so. The naval power of this thing, of this country and now this empire is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's just the mass amount of everything that they covered. You're just going to have to be good at sailing to even get to and from these places. And all of these holdings that they have, mostly in South America and then the stuff that they had in Africa, not only are they pulling gold and silver out of the Americas, they're pulling slaves. They're pulling slaves out of Africa too. So as they're bringing these slaves up into Spain, it almost provides not the riches of trying to rob a galleon that's carrying a bunch of money that's just basically like a floating Brinks truck, but you have the element of being able to steal a slave ship, which then you can take back to England and sell, which Liz wasn't real big on until she realized that it was a lot harder to get the gold and silver boats, and she could technically handle the slavery, so it kind of became okay.
Well, she also had to keep the privateers and everything that she was hiring, which is a big thing. As soon as Philip, and I think it was even before he tried to, I'm not sure how quickly he tried to propose, the marriage or anything like that.
As soon as Mary died.
Okay.
So it was like bang, bang.
And Elizabeth just wasn't having it, so much in fact that, she does the Protestant thing. She then supports the Dutch revolt.
Yep. Oh, yeah. We got a full list of the shit that she does.
No. And then I'm just getting, and I know we're going to talk about that, but what I'm saying one of the other things she does is she is basically hiring privateers, which is just a hired pirate. It's a privateer, someone that basically has the permission to do all the pirate shit they want to do. They're just doing it in the name of a crown or a country against others. So Elizabeth is like hiring these people. Sir Francis Drake is actually one of them, probably just Francis Drake at that point because he gets his sir here coming up, but is like, yeah, go out and just fuck up these Portuguese and Spanish ships, hit these treasure fleets, just bring back some.
Yeah.
And that's what he does. He gets really good at it as well.
That's the incredible thing is Francis Drake, while kind of being a pirate to start out with, like you said, the only difference between being a privateer and a pirate is paperwork. Like that's just a little bit of paperwork.
Your paperwork has the stamp on it of the royal family, whatnot.
And in doing so, Francis Drake now has to share, well, Francis Drake, John Hawkins, and a couple of these other privateers, quote unquote, they have to pay a portion of whatever they get back to the Queen. Also, at the same time, you're seeing private finance from other members in England, as far as the rich elites that are putting in on these privateer vessels, basically for a share of whatever comes back of the booty. And privateer, is it still called booty?
Oh yeah, it's always called booty, buddy.
Okay.
So Francis Drake, and excited to do an episode on him because a lot more to this guy than I actually realized. He navigated the planet between December 1577 and September 1580. Do you have that in here?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. He's he's the second person to circumnavigate the globe, correct? First Englishman.
After Magellan.
Yep. Okay.
So, just as you're talking about, Elizabeth pulls the Protestant move, and then she rejects Philip. Philip then goes ahead and runs back to Sixtus and says...
Who's the Pope at that time?
Yep. Who's the Pope, and says, hey, she's doing the Protestant thing again. Can we declare her a heretic? This is like, yep, that sounds pretty good. She sounds like a heretic.
You're really adamant about this. Did something happen? Like, I mean, she's, I get you're upset about the Protestant thing, but that should be more so our problem here at the church. What's really going on here? I proposed to her and she said no.
Well, and then the church can also say that she's not a legitimate heir to the throne because she came along after the divorce that was never recognized by the Catholic Church.
Correct, but then who are they saying it's supposed to go to? Is it still Mary, Queen of Scots? I think that's who they still were kind of.
Yeah, because she was still alive at this point in time. Philip then, as we talked about, supports all these Catholic uprisings in Ireland, these plots to assassinate Elizabeth. Liz supported the Protestant uprising in the Netherlands, as Chris was just talking about, these Dutch revolts. Excuse me. She also goes into a political alliance with the Moroccan Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur for arms trade after the Portuguese throne is thrown into turmoil after the Battle of Al-Asir Kabir, which, again, the Ottoman Empire, that was the same battle that the Portuguese king died in.
Okay.
So Elizabeth did a deal with the Portuguese king's killer, basically. Once they saw that the succession was going to fall to Spain, even the Ottomans and the English got together, were like, hey, we see things differently.
The triangle has just expanded.
Yeah.
Now they're just like, okay, who are we making alliance with now?
We're going to go outside of even Christianity.
It's because Spain is so big that they have to hit areas outside of Spain.
They have to do every single thing that they could. And it just is Elizabeth trying because she just does not have the power to match up with Spain. She knows that these things are going to happen. Then, as you're talking about, we get these English sailors that become these privateers, John Hawkins, Francis Drake. They're given the green light to start pirating these Spanish ships as they were returning from the New World. Some had riches, some had slaves. Either way, any of that money going into the coffers is going to make England a lot more formidable for the Spanish. And Sir Francis Drake's, he's got a lot of big stuff. From 1577 to 1580, he circumnavigates the world. He starts off with 5 ships and 169 sailors. They would end up capturing the Santa Maria, which was off of the Portuguese coast, or it was a Portuguese ship
Not the same one.
I think it was a different one. I think the
it
Santa
had to
Maria
have
was
been,
the
okay.
Spanish one. I'm sure they
Okay.
both probably had similar named ships. In Santiago, off of Cape Verde, it was a merchant ship, so it wasn't the royal ship. Not a real great haul. I believe it had booze and a couple other things on it, which I'm sure, they probably weren't too bummed to run into booze while they were out there.
Any supplies you can get, you're
Yeah.
taking, yeah.
They end up crossing the Atlantic. They hit Santiago in the Dominican Republic and raid that port. They hit Santo Domingo in that port, also in the Dominican Republic, and raid that port.
It's a world privateer tour is what it is.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to know that he just has all these stops because Elizabeth told him, in order to circumnavigate this, we need you to hit places where they're not going to expect. And Cape Verde is obviously very easy to plunder that first one to kind of get it under your belt.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to expect you to go across the Atlantic and start hitting the Dominican Republic and in the Caribbean.
No.
Because word of you raiding those ports isn't going to make it back to Spain until your ass is way further down in South America.
Yeah.
So after that, he ends up hitting Cartagena in Colombia.
And even then, what are you flying? Are you flying the colors of England? Are you flying your own flag? Like, I don't know if it's something that can be directly tied or they're like, we just got attacked by pirates.
Yeah, he uses that trick a little later on in a roll up to the Armada. He also threw in St. Augustine, Florida, somewhere in there. He would end up traveling down the east coast of South America. He would round Cape Horn, and then he starts
Cape Good Hope. Huh? Isn't Cape Horn in Africa? Cape of Good Hope is in South America.
I don't think we ever get this right. I'm pretty sure it's Cape Horn in South America. But whatever horn he ends up going around, he starts hitting these places in these
God
Chilean.
damn it, you're right.
Cape Horn?
Yeah.
He just starts basically attacking these Chilean ports. And if you're not going to be able to get a letter back to Spain from the Caribbean very fast, imagine trying to do it from Chile.
Yeah.
Like, you're not getting word back to Spain fast enough for any sort of defense. Mm-hmm. He's popping in and hitting these places. They're stopping along the coast to get supplies and all that kind of stuff.
That's all he's doing. He's just going up the coast. It's almost like he's mapping it too.
Yeah. And I'm sure they probably had a decent idea of where these Spanish ports were going to be.
They had to have a cartographer on one of those ships.
Probably.
What was the ship that he was leading as his flagship? The Golden Hind.
The Golden Hind, I believe, was renamed for the Santa Maria after they took it. I think he made that his main ship after they grabbed it, which is where all the alcohol was. So
that does make sense because I saw recreations of it. They have one, and it looks very much like a Spanish galleon in like how it's built tall.
Also, it probably didn't hurt if he was the lead ship pulling into these Spanish ports in a Spanish ship first.
That's true.
That's good cover, I would think, to come into there. He would end up hitting, I believe the next one was a Peruvian port. Off the coast of Nicaragua, he hits the jackpot. He ends up nabbing one of these Spanish treasure ships. I don't know how in the world. They had to have taken the ship back with them because you're not going to transport that much treasure onto your own vessels.
I mean, you could spread it throughout 5.
Maybe, potentially. But again, the weight of carrying all this stuff back.
It does. And that's the thing is like some of these treasure ships or galleons could hold like 1,200 tons. They could hold, like, that's the thing that's so crazy. You're just like, this is a wooden ship. The amount of cargo, and we talked about this, I think, during the the Dutch East Indies episode, and any episode we talked about, I think just from a logistics perspective, all that shit's on one ship. What if you lose that ship? I feel like you got to spread that out, even if you're spreading it out on 6 ships or something like that. You got to have stuff in case you lose a couple.
Yeah, and probably taking it back in one Spanish ship, knowing that how easily you took it.
True.
You want to spread it out just in case.
He ends up getting all the way up to California.
Yep. Yeah, I believe he stopped somewhere in California before they start making the trip back around. They needed another resupply before they start crossing the Pacific. Mm-hmm. After they cross over the Pacific, he ends up harassing ships in Indonesia that were also in Spain. Basically, they came out to meet that first Hind.
Missing Hawaii, thank God.
Yeah, I don't know if he had Hawaii or who had Hawaii at that point in time. I don't know if anybody did.
No one had Hawaii. I thought Captain Cook was the first one that found Hawaii.
He could have been. So they crossed through the Philippines first. They crossed through King Philip's Philippines. It stopped, refresh there.
Crawling in his back door.
Yeah. These Indonesian ships come out thinking that they're Spanish ships. As soon as they see the rest of the English ships roll up, they just go ahead and head right back into port. He doesn't end up messing with them. They end up coming all the way back around Africa and end up back in Plymouth with just a riches of raids. I believe the number that I heard was that his trip was 4,800% profit. So all of the money that was invested in this big circumnavigation, they made 4,800% profit of what they put in. A ton of it went into Elizabeth's coffers. This made
Drake like, very, very wealthy.
Yeah, independently very wealthy.
That got him knighted.
Yep.
I believe.
It also, interestingly enough, Elizabeth didn't let anybody else count all the money that they brought back. And then she went ahead and swore Drake to secrecy if he ever told anybody how much he had actually brought back. The punishment was death for Drake.
And I believe that they had a close enough relationship that she called him Drake. And being called by this your surname by like a queen like that, like there was some, I don't know if they were like, but that gave him very high standing.
She was a virgin until she died.
Yeah. Enough so to where he was actually, and I'm not sure if it was at this time, but he's second in command of the English Navy during the Spanish Armada.
Yeah.
So he's up there.
Hey, he's going to keep playing a role throughout this whole entire thing. He's still got some fun exploits before the Armada starts. Philip was just pissed at this point in time, and he begins to intensify this buildup of plans to try and hit England.
I want to say I heard that Elizabeth knighted him on the deck of his ship. Did you remember hearing that?
I don't remember hearing it, but it would make total sense.
Which is a Spanish ship.
Oh, if it was the Golden Hind?
I believe it was the Golden Hind because that's what he took as his flagship. She knighted him, and I want to say that it was like a jab. Being like, oh yeah, I knighted this guy who actually stole one of your ships.
I could see that being fairly disrespectful in the grand scheme of things. Philip kind of starts wanting to figure out how to hit England. So he's going to start reaching out and doing a couple other things. Kind of what pushes him over the top, February 8th, 1587, Mary Queen of Scots is executed for her role in the conspiracy of the Babington Plot. Babington Plot was another conspiracy to kill Elizabeth. I think we talked about it in the
Scotland episode for secession of like who.
It might have been in the Royals episode. It might have been
Could have been both.
The Monarchy episode. Yeah. This might have been a frame job on Mary Queen of Squat, or wow, not Queen of Squats.
She had a dump truck, Queen of Squats.
Yep, that's a different lady. But she was involved in this Babington Plot. And
That's what she was doing in that cell. She was getting prison strong.
Yeah.
And building up those glutes so she could jump if she needed to, take off running, outrun a horse.
She could choke Liz out with them.
That's how she would have executed her in a public square, just crushed her head between her thighs.
I'd watch.
That's going to have to be a shirt at some point as Mary Queen of Squats.
Yeah. This is kind of the last straw for Philip. Philip just sees basically like the last attempt.
The last vestige of hope of something he could plug in there.
Yeah.
Aside from just straight up, I got to conquer this place.
It was his Catholic Uno card, and she's dead. So at that point in time, Philip is like, all right, we have to start putting calls out everywhere. We need to start collecting ships for the Spanish Armada. He goes back to Sixtus and asks Sixtus for his help. Sixtus actually releases... so let's see, how does this go? Okay. February 8th, 1587, Mary Queen of Scots is executed. April 1587, Francis Drake hits Cadiz.
Yeah, so before Cadiz, I think. Before he hit that real quick, what they would be, it's known as the Spanish Armada, but in Spain, it first got its start as this thing called the Enterprise of England. Now, the Enterprise of England was the plan for how they would essentially exert control over England, whether it be by invasion or how it was going to go down. It was first proposed, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was 1583. So this is 4 years before Mary Queen of Scots is executed. So they're already kind of planning what's going to happen if, our contingency plan in Mary doesn't end up working out. Philip, seeing, like you were saying, seeing England now as weak and him not having any options, decides that he's going to have to invade, goes to Sixtus, and is basically like, hey, I'm going to need your guys' backing on this. We're going against the Protestants anyway.
Doesn't this happen after Drake hits Cadiz?
Drake hits... No, this is first.
Okay, well, I have this July 29th of that same year.
So I'm back in... Okay, so I'm also in 1586 as well. So I think he's talking to the... I don't think, after he attacks Cadiz, I don't think that's when Philip goes to the Pope and is like, hey, we need to do this. I think he's planning this because, again, the Enterprise of England is first proposed in 1583. I think he's been planting the seeds, at least. Sorry, what I wanted to get to was 1586. This is when they determine that loading up and sending a full force from Spain to invade England isn't going to work. So he has all these different people drawing up plans to try to figure out what the best method of actual invasion is going to be. And I want to say the dude's name that ends up drawing up the plans is the Marquis of Santa Cruz.
He had two plans. He had Santa Cruz, who drew up the naval plan, and he also was talking to, I believe it was like his cousin, potentially, that was up in the lowlands and the Netherlands.
The Duke of Parma.
Yes.
So his name was Alexander. I can't remember exactly what it was, but
we're just going to go with Parma. And
Parma is kind of how he was referred to.
But these were the two plans that he ended up asking for and got plans back from both of them.
And they were missing things.
Yep.
Like it was like the two halves of the same plan that hadn't ended up being put together. The Marquis was like, oh yeah, I'll totally control the Navy. We'll sail the ships up there and we'll invade. And Philip's like, well, don't you need guys to invade? And he's like, yeah, I guess we do need guys. The Duke of Parma is like, hey, we can actually invade England. We're going to go over there. We'll set up camp. We'll go after London. And Philip's like, how are you going to get over to England? He's like, shit. So he's like, hold on. What we'll do is, because we can't afford to build up a bunch of troops here, we're going to have to pull a bunch of people in. Technically, we'll probably have to pull people in from the lowlands, which is where Belgium and stuff like that is, just to sail them from Lisbon, which is in Portugal now, but this is where they were going to be sending out the attacking force. We need too many ships to carry that many people, too many supplies that we're going to have to pack, because again, we're taking everything we need for a long-standing invasion up there with us. So why don't you just take the Navy and all of these merchant ships, take all the supplies up there, go up to the lowlands, pick up Parma and all of his troops, and then you only have to shuttle them a little bit across to the English or to England. You're good.
Basically from Dunkirk over to the island. We know that that's possible. We've talked about Dunkirk a whole lot later on in history.
Yeah.
But
this was going to be the original little ships of Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Had it gone off.
I can kind of see Philip's thinking in knowing that you need a rather large force, but you also need the ships to attack at the same time. So I can understand why he would mesh these two together. But it seems like Parma wasn't a real big fan of meshing these two things together. And I think he kind of knew, because, as we'll talk about, becomes an issue. In order to leave Dunkirk there, the Spanish don't have those kinds of ships to get into Dunkirk to load up.
Yeah.
Because everything is so much shallower, and you have these deep bowed.
Oh, fuck. How do they phrase it? Shallow keeled?
Possibly.
So, yeah, you can only bring in your larger ships so far in, and then you have smaller ships that can then go in a little bit further. But to load these guys up, this isn't like you're thinking of Dunkirk in World War II, where there's a harbor built that goes out into the deeper water. This is, hey, we just have to get you guys up on the bank. or maybe there's a little bit of a dock, but it's still shallow water. So you have to have almost barges to then ship all the guys out. Think of it, the way it was phrased to me made a lot of sense. It's a reverse D-Day. Whereas D-Day brought all the guys over close and then sent them in on the flat bottom boats.
Yeah.
This is getting guys off the beaches in these flat bottom shallow draft is how they refer to it. Shallow draft boats out to the waiting larger ships and then get them in from there.
Yeah, it's like hitting reverse on D-Day, basically.
Not only is it contingent on, because that was also one of the things they told the Duke of Parma was like, you're going to have some time to do this, so you need to start gathering up these small boats, the ones that you're going to use to get out to the main fleet. I don't know where their thinking was, because you have to coordinate this to the point when he has to know when the fleet's going to get there to have all of his men ready. But communication takes, did they say 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Just to get a letter one way.
From Spain up to the lowlands.
Yes.
And that's not even to mention, to coordinate this, your messenger ships coming from the Armada are going to have to get to Parma in enough time for Parma to be ready to meet them. But the thing is, the messenger ships don't go too much faster than the Armada.
Mm-hmm. And you don't know they're not well armed. Yeah. They're supposed to be light and fast. Yeah, they have some cannons on them, but if they run into anything bigger, what happens here? You don't know that the message got sunk. Mm-hmm.
So yes, Philip the Genius combining these two plans. It sounds logical, but when you hear the two different plans, the way that it was explained
is that for the Spanish Armada to have worked, everything had to come off with precision for the Spanish. And in a scenario where being precise just wasn't even possible because the lines of communication were so far apart. Before we get to Drake's little raid on Cadiz and also some more of Pope action, let's take a bathroom break.
Okay.
Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials. Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I mean, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. All right, so it's time for Drake's raid on Cadiz. Now, Elizabeth knows that something's kind of up. And word has gotten around, even though it travels insanely slow. She's probably heard some words through the Catholic grapevine or some spies that they would have that Spain is planning something. So she's like, hey, Francis, why don't you go and have a little bit of fun on the coast of Spain and see what you can do? So he ends up targeting about the furthest place away from England that you can and still be in Spain proper, because Cadiz is down there.
I thought it was, oh no, that's the place that they come back to when they're done up at the top of northern Spain. Cadiz, there was some story that I heard today that the Cadiz port was left fairly open because most of the army that worked in the port was actually in the town of Cadiz proper watching like a street performer out doing something, and it left Drake and his group just enough time to sneak into the port. They were in the port for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Just taking fire, blowing up ships. They end up burning 37 ships. That's not even the biggest deal, because what else he does is something that I never would have thought of, but it makes so much sense. He destroyed basically a year's backlog of barrel rings and barrel staves. Now, barrel staves are the wood that is seasoned and aged in order to seal a barrel properly to be able to be watertight.
Get Cooper to get his hands on it. Yeah, you never think about that.
No.
Asset denial, man. And the reason that this was such a huge deal is everything was kept in barrels. Fresh water that had to be taken on ships had to be in extremely well-crafted watertight barrels.
Yep.
Food that they had to pack in salt and everything like that had to be put in barrels. Literally everything had to be put in barrels. And when you don't have it, you can't feed a navy. You can't send a navy anywhere. So Cadiz is actually... So you have like Spain, the west coast, most of it taken up by Portugal now. It's past Portugal, halfway between the border of Portugal and Gibraltar. So he was down there. At the same time, that's got to be an area that if, Elizabeth is talking to me and like, so where are you planning on going? You're going to kind of hit like more of like someplace in the Bay of Biscay or anything? He's like, I've heard that a lot of the treasure ships actually head down to Cadiz. So if it's all right with you, they also have that crazy barrel factory down there that we could take out. But like you said, flies in under Spanish colors. I want to say under with a Spanish flag flying.
It was either that or he didn't have a flag.
It was one or the other, but they still were. He got in there. And he wanted to hold the town, for like a couple weeks to be able to see if any treasure ships came in and then he could just take them.
Yeah, he was looking for a little payday, looking to wet his beak.
Ended up staying there several days, causing a whole bunch of, damage like you were saying. But the fact that he destroyed enough of these barrel staves to set back the mission an entire year is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you can't have supplies in barrels that are going to allow food to spoil or water to leak, gunpowder to leak. The last thing you want is loose gunpowder floating around a ship like that. There's just so many things that he affected with this attack. And it, again, just you see Philip's temper go through the roof, goes back July 29th to Rome. He obtains a papal authority to go ahead and bump off Elizabeth, to get rid of Elizabeth.
They consider it a crusade.
Yeah.
The Pope sanctions it as a crusade.
Yeah, because, again, Sixtus allows Philip to collect a crusade tax and then promise to subsidize them if they reach English soil.
He offers what are called indulgences.
Like that.
So an indulgence, the way I understand it, and any of our Catholic listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically lowers the amount of repentance you have to do for certain acts that are considered uncouth, I guess. So he's basically saying like, okay, listen, guys, I know normally when you go to war, you kill people, you got to come back, you got to say like 50 Hail Marys to get out of this thing. With this indulgence thing we got going on, you come back, you say you're like 10 Hail Marys, and it's all good. So it's basically just like reducing the sentencing, the religious sentencing that these guys would have to do.
Sounds like the Catholic Church is pretty excited about the possibility of getting England back.
Oh, yeah, by the way, also, once you take it over, you know what's going to be coming back to our pockets, right?
Yeah. So this Armada was nuts. It would end up... do you have anything before we start talking about numbers?
Yeah, so the Marquis of Santa Cruz, who drew up the plans, he was actually going to be appointed the commander of the naval forces. Parma was going to be the commander of the invasion force once they got on to land. That whole campaign was going to be under Parma. Santa Cruz ends up dying February of 1588. And he was a guy that had naval experience. He had been in battle, things like that. That's why he was tapped first and foremost to do this.
Do you know how he died?
What did he get? What did he catch? Typhus, right? Typhoid?
A typhoid outbreak that happened as they were amassing and building up the troops for the Armada.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a recurring theme throughout this entire thing. You get a bunch of people together. Hygiene goes down the fucking toilet. No pun intended. But yeah, he ends up getting typhoid and dying. So this guy that they tapped to take over is the Duke of Medina Sidonia. And this guy was a recognized soldier. He was a duke. He was obviously in that upper echelon of people that they could actually put into this position and could command anybody under him. Little problem though. This guy, while a tremendous organizer of naval resources, getting ships together, all that kind of stuff, had no naval battle experience. Didn't know how to organize fleets, didn't know how to conduct an actual like battle, like the order, like where to put ships and everything. Maybe had a little bit of an idea because he's also going to have people under him that have more experience. But as far as a comparison, huge downgrade from the Marquis de Santa Cruz.
Another part of that huge downgrade, Medina Sidonia didn't want to go.
No. And they basically, he wrote a letter, didn't he?
Yep.
Wrote a letter to King Philip and was like, so listen, man, I have never been in a naval battle before. I mean, I don't feel like I would be the best person for this.
In fact, I get seasick.
Yeah, exactly. Horribly. I get seasick on the river, man, or out in the bay. He sends the letter to Philip. Philip, of course, has letter openers that are reviewing everything to make sure that all the dirtiest of letters get to him and any of that other shit business gets handled by somebody else. And they intercept it and go to Sidonia and are like, so, hey, yeah, we're not showing this to Philip. We're going to give you a chance here. If you decline this, your standing, your reputation, everything, gone. So you might want to think about that. Do you want us to burn the letter? And he's like, just, yeah, fucking burn the letter. I guess I'm doing this.
What letter? I didn't send
Exactly.
anything. But this is kind of the thing about Sidonia, though, was he had spent basically his entire career back on land launching and receiving these treasure ships that are coming from they're coming from the Americas. Mm-hmm. So he's very good at like the first 10% of a mission and the last 10% of a mission.
He's great at admin.
Yeah.
Logistics guy.
Well, even so, I thought this was kind of crazy. Before they ended up leaving, he ended up nabbing a printing press, and he would use the printing press to go through and basically print off like a packet for each ship.
Like missives of what the mission was going to be.
Yep. It had lines so he could go through and write whatever the ship's name was to hand them out so they would know the direct orders and what they were supposed to do, kind of what was in their purview for what their mission was.
Did the same thing with maps. He walked out there and the fleet was assembling and everything. And he's like, how many maps do we have? They're like, well, the lead ship has a map. He's like, no one else has a map? They're like, no, the lead ship has a map. That's where it's going to be leading. Goes out and has, I think, like 50 plus, maybe 60 copies of these maps made. And he's like, we might get separated.
Yeah.
Storms happen.
Yep.
It's a very large fleet. Now people can find their way of where they're actually going. So again, very good at that beginning stage and the receiving stage of the ship. Mm-hmm. The stuff that happens in between, especially when it's against other navies, that's where it's going to be a little dicey or a lot dicey.
Which unfortunately is the other 80% of the mission.
Yeah. So the Pope blesses the Armada's banner, which I believe was a large banner of a crucified Christ.
It makes sense. They use the crucifixion as a...
Did you see also some of these flags that these ships would fly, like the size of the Spanish flag? It was like bigger than a sail.
Really?
Yeah, it was enormous. But he ends up, again, granting the indulgences. One thing, though, as they are getting ready, July 21st, 1558, to actually launch this armada, is they start pulling away from the docks. And the sailors are all like, yeah, rah, 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 we're going to war. And they look out, and one of the ships isn't leaving the dock. And they're like, what ship is that? And they're like, that's the brothel ship.
Oh, no.
And they're like, what? Why isn't it dropping its sails? They're like, this is a church-sanctioned crusade.
Oh, yeah.
The brothel ship doesn't go with us. When that happens and that thing doesn't take out of port, what do you think the feeling is like, the morale is like of those guys seeing it just sitting there collecting dust?
Mutiny.
An instant thought of attempt mutiny, right?
Not only that, Sidonia actually sets up all of these insane rules. You can't curse on the ship. You can't gamble on the ship. Like, that has to be these guys' two favorite things besides the brothel ship.
No vices. No vices. Captain, what the fuck did we get the indulgences for? Technically, those are actually just for officers. You guys are still under the regular rules of asking for forgiveness for shit that you do.
You completely misled us when you said the word indulgences. Why is the brothel ship back there? That's our indulgences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, Pope says no go on the horse ship.
Well, and this also could have been strategy because their whole idea that we'll talk about of the grappling, these guys would be extra mad if they had to board a British ship without any of their indulgences.
Yeah, exactly. So go over the numbers now, kind of the ships. Now, the numbers, they vary. It's not one of those things that's been lost to history. It's just the history is trying to be gathered from two different sources, the English and the Spanish. Spanish are going to underestimate, English are going to overestimate, so you got to kind of meet in the middle. So if I have any differences in ships, just tell me kind of.
Okay. Well, not to mention, there's also times when ships just head back to port. It's like they just call it a day and go back home. There's no
man,
specific,
we're leaking.
Yeah,
so much water.
There's no specific reason besides maybe they have some sort of an error, but it's not just one ship leaving. It's like 3 to 5 ships at a time that just head back.
Yeah. So as they take off, July 21st, 1588, roughly 150 ships, kind of in that area, give or take 10 or 20, 10,100 plus sailors, 19,315. Not sure where they get the exact numbers here, but I'm just going to say the 19,300 plus soldiers and 1,500 plus non-combatants. That includes people working the merchant ships, cooks, jobs like that.
Not ladies in the night.
Not ladies of the night. 0 ladies of the night. They were equipped with 1,500 brass guns, cannons, basically, 1,000 iron guns, cannons.
That's what that means.
What?
Brass guns or cannons.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what a brass rifle would look like, and it just didn't make any sense to me because you couldn't cast it big enough to carry and also be effective.
Correct. I mean, they still had what they call the arquebuses, which were basically very early, versions of muskets, but they would use those for just ship-to-ship combat, which would have to be very close.
And it would have to be stronger than brass, I think.
Iron is definitely stronger. That's why the English end up making all theirs out of iron. And you can be more precise with it. And the way that it absorbs in heat and everything like that.
Doesn't flex.
So out of these 150-ish ships, 24 were purpose-built for war. Now that sounds low, but you also had 44 armed merchant ships. And armed merchant ships were not like, hey, we got 2 cannons. Merchant ships could have 20 plus, 25 plus. These 24 purpose-built are these larger ships, huge carrying capacity for men's supplies, but these are also the ones that have, 40 or 50 cannons. They have multiple gun decks. These would be the ones that would be essentially protecting like the perimeter of the interior fleet, which would be all the supply ships carrying the tents, the food, anything and everything they're going to need to actually invade England. Parma is supposed to be waiting with about 60,000. They say he had 60,500 plus troops waiting to actually load up onto these ships and be taken across the English Channel.
I thought they decided it was going to be 30,000 they were going to take.
Well, it ends up being less than that because by the time they get there, some shit's gone down. Because remember, he's also trying to build up these forces. It's not like the week before he's calling everybody in. He's been doing this since they initiated that plan and they had to push the plan back a year. So he has a large selection or collection of forces amassed. But again, what happens when you get a whole bunch of troops in close quarters living like that?
Disease.
You get diseases.
Not to mention, it's not like there's not fighting in the lowlands at that point in time. They're still fighting against the revolt.
Going on.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So storm in the Bay of Biscay. So they actually leave from Lisbon, which is in Portugal. I think to me, it looks like it's about halfway up the west coast of Spain, or what Portugal is now. They get into the Bay of Biscay, which is the bay that cuts into the northwestern part of Spain. And they lose 4 galleys, 1 galleon, and a couple other ships that are damaged. So I'm going to go through just kind of what the collection of ships that they had and kind of give you a little bit of overview so you can know what the ships, kind of their role is actually. So for the Spanish, they had galleons, which are basically these massive ships that are built for close combat. The way that the Spanish went about things is their naval tactics, like you alluded to earlier, was they wanted to get in close, not to pound you with the cannons or the guns. It's because they wanted to do ship to ship, get their soldiers over that were armored, be able to fire the arquebuses down onto the enemy deck, and then be able to take the enemy ship. That was their method of actually winning these things, was a land battle on the deck of a ship.
Hand-to-hand combat.
Hand-to-hand combat. These galleons' jobs were to basically pull up next to these ships, get in close. They would have these multi-tiered gun decks, fire a large volley of these things to disorient or damage the enemy ship, grapple it, pull it close, and then all of the guys with armor and everything would jump across and take the ship.
Less of a broadside technique, too?
Their ships were built for naval battle. The broadsides were simply just used for part of that boarding process on, both sides. So they had it. the way that the Spanish Armada would fight is they always thought of being pursued or pursuing. So the main naval guns that they would use for even any type of range were mostly concentrated in the front of the boat, or maybe a couple in the back for like pursuit fighting.
Yeah.
You had carracks, which were kind of the next size down. These were armed merchant ships, basically converted for naval use, so they had gun decks and everything. Galleasses, which is a cross between a galleon and a galley. These had oars and masts. So the galleon, the carracks, didn't have oars. It was strictly just wind-powered.
It had a fat-ass bow on the back of it.
It did. And the way that the Spanish ships are built, they're built tall.
Yep.
That's why a lot of the comparisons to the English Navy is like, well, they had such smaller ships. It wasn't that they were smaller in tonnage or anything like that. They were just constructed differently. The Spanish wanted to build theirs high, almost like to the ridiculousness that you look at. It's like a tapered point going up.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and then a very tall front on it as well. That was so when they got up close, the guys that were shooting down with the little musket rifles would have an open area just to fire straight down onto the deck of another ship. They would always be in a higher position.
That, and I'm sure it's also a massive advantage to have that high of a ship going through waves in the ocean.
I don't think it is.
You don't
that
think?
comes in? No, because think of it in the terms of like where the center of gravity in the boat is. Remember those? They've been around for fucking ever. They're like the sock'em fighters, where you put sand or water on the very bottom of them.
Yeah,
and then you
sock'em
inflame
poppers.
Sock'em poppers, whatever. If you hit one of those, you know how it goes all the way down, then takes a while to come all the way up? If you were to shrink that down half the size and tip it, it would right itself a lot faster, right?
Yeah.
It's carrying less weight up top, so it's less weight that it has to come carry on the upswing.
But if you're going east to west, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, you're going to be taking most of those waves in the front of your ship, right?
I don't know if that has anything to do with them being taller in the back and everything too.
Well, a tall front, though.
Yeah, that would explain the tall front, but it's less stable as far as maybe they're better for ocean going because they're taller like that. But when it comes to the Spanish Armada, it's a fight.
Fighting's not.
So from an advantageous position about like, hey, what's going to stay steadier? A ship with a lower mass or a higher mass? When you start hitting waves or start having to turn, it's going to lean a lot more. So with these, so you have the galleons, the carracks, the galleasses. Galleys are long, low, oar-powered. They have sails, but those aren't great in open ocean. This was what Spain would use like in the Mediterranean or close to shore, because it could also operate in shallower water because you could use oars and everything, and you didn't have to rely on wind. They had these things called urcas, which were basically just the slow supply vessels. They were going to be forming the interior of this like formation that they'd be sailing in. And then pataches, small, fast scout ships.
I thought those were the penises.
They might be.
I thought that's the way they pronounced them. Sounds like a Spanish guy saying penis.
It could have. Let's go with that. So these were the ones that would basically be, like you said, going out to send messages, bring back reports, kind of scanning ahead of them and everything.
Don't end up going very much faster than the actual
No,
Armada.
it does not. So kind of getting back to the actual journey itself, they lose 4 galleons in this storm, or 4 galleys, 1 galleon, a couple others are damaged. They have to end up pulling into one of the ports there to do some repairs on some of the ships. And turns out around 100,
Karuna.
yeah, around 117 ships, maybe a little bit more, end up entering the English Channel.
Well, the big issue was when they had to pull into Corona for repairs. What are your guys on your ships eating? You're not allowing them to go into the city because there's a good
never
chance
find
they're
them
leaving.
again, man.
Yeah, they're gone. And I think in some cases they actually ferried them out to an island so they couldn't escape. Like they were being held prisoner before they were brought back and loaded onto the ships.
You just went through a storm bad enough to require your ship to be pulled into port for repairs. In your head, you're thinking, is there going to be one of these places if our ship gets damaged once we go a little bit further into the English Channel? Mm-hmm. Fuck no, I'm staying here.
So they're holding them on ships, and they are eating up all of the supplies that they're supposed to have for this whole entire thing as they're in port. Now they're scrambling, trying to get more supplies and everything like that. But this isn't like a full depot where they had all this stuff ready to go on the ships before.
They're not there to supply thousands of people with extra supplies. They have enough to keep the city going, probably.
Mm-hmm. So your resupply coming out of that port after that long wait that you had only sets you back in all of the supplies besides gunpowder and ammunition, probably. Like those are the only two things. And you probably even use some of those just trying to settle some scores on the ships. But
it comes down to, I think, kind of thinking about it. How long do they wait for those ships, all of them, to get repaired? Because then you're just using up, like you said, all these supplies. There comes a time when it's like, we got to leave at this point or we're not going to have enough supplies to get to Calais or Dunkirk and everything like that.
Yep.
So they end up leaving short of ships and enter the English Channel with 117. Now, the layout of the English Channel in regards to how this engagement is going to take place is there's this thing called the Lizard. And I don't know if it's a county, a city or anything like that, but they called it the Lizard. And it's one of the most southwestern points of the English islands.
it looks like an isthmus almost, and it kind of looks like a lizard.
But it basically lets you see who's entering the English Channel, and they end up having some scouts there, and there's a beacon system. And all I could think of at this point was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, where the beacons are lit, the beacons are lit. He ends up seeing some Spanish ships coming in. There's a scout ship from the English Navy or a merchant ship or something like that. They end up seeing the Armada. They're like, oh shit, we got to go warn everybody. They turn around and they start heading for the Lizard. And as they're getting there, they fire off the cannons. And no shot or anything like that, just to make the noise. That tells the guys that are working these beacons, oh shit, something's going down, alert them. They light the beacons, and just like in fucking Lord of the Rings, the next beacon is in visible range. The next beacon, and they're just lighting these things up until they end up notifying Plymouth. And Plymouth is where the main bulk of what's going to be the English Navy for all intents and purposes during this episode, that lets them know, hey, guess what? That thing we suspected was going to happen, the invasion, yeah, the Armada's on its way right now.
I thought that I had heard that they had beacons all the way back into London, too.
They probably did, but once it got to Plymouth,
yeah,
that at least let the Navy know what was going down.
But London's finding out very shortly after.
However long it takes those things to get lit all the way. Maybe 6 hours, something like that.
Yeah. The British Navy feels like such an odd conglomeration of ships that they have. But it's because they didn't have the exact right amount of time to get ready. And not only that, we were talking about that shift into building these fast track
race-built galleons.
Yes. So they had enough time, but I think they said that they were pressing those out. Like the new ships that Hawkins was building was about 2 a year that they could produce.
Yeah.
And then he was also taking other galleons and kind of retrofitting them and flattening them out to turn it into it.
Yeah. So the difference, that John Hawkins kind of pioneered here, these things were going to be longer, lower, and more agile. Again, they knew that they couldn't beat the Spanish at this fight that would be, hey, we're just going to put our ships together and see who's going to fight it out on the deck. Our solution here is we're never going to let you get close enough to throw those grappling hooks over. So the way that these things are designed, they're longer, so they displace the weight that way, which makes them more agile and maneuverable. They're lower, which makes them a steadier gun platform because they don't tip so much and take time to recover. They did something to the rigging and the sails that they made some alterations to it that allowed these ships to catch the wind at different angles and a little bit better.
I think they were bigger sails, and
they
might have make the sails bigger because they were
proportionately
lower.
Bigger to the actual ship itself. So basically, these things are longer, lower, more agile, and where it really comes in, these things were designed as mobile artillery platforms. The design and the strategy of the Spanish was these ships have to come all the way across the ocean. If we design our warships to simply serve as that warships, we're missing out on what tonnage. Mm-hmm. We're already sending 3 of these ships to protect 20 treasure ships. What if we could load up these 3 ships and have 23 treasure ships? We need to load a bunch of guys on this because we're using these for invasions. We need to load a bunch of cargo. our main method of fighting isn't just having sailors on board. It's having sailors, but we have to have infantry on board that are fighting across the decks of these ships. The English are like, no, these are just going to be sailors and gunners on these things. All of the cannons that the English are using are all iron cannons. And I'll kind of break it down what the English actually have. And then if you're ready, I want to go through kind of the tactical advantages before we go into the order of battle.
Yeah, I'm listening. Something struck me. Do you think these were Ottoman cannons on the English ships?
Oh, no. They made them themselves.
Okay, so even though Elizabeth had signed that arms deal with
they figured
Sultan,
out the English cannons were, I think, the most advanced and accurate in the world after they designed them.
That's why I was thinking Ottomans, because
Yeah.
they're pretty good with cannons too.
Exactly. So for the English, they had these race-built galleons. I want to say the number that they had, 34 ships in the Royal Fleet. The English had 200 plus ships.
Yeah.
So they outnumbered the Spanish, but the Spanish had 50% more firepower in their ships than they had in those 200 ships. So it's a weird kind of disparity there.
Well, and it's a misleading disparity too, and we'll talk about the fire rate of these guns that changes the firepower.
So there were 34 ships of the Royal Fleet. 21 of those, I believe, were these race-built galleons, or at least converted galleons that they were able to kind of like refit and everything like that for how they wanted to fight.
Yeah.
12 of these 200 were owned by privateers. This guy named Lord Howard, I can't remember of what, but he was essentially the admiral of this. He was the leader of the...
Effingham. Howard of Effingham.
Howard of Effingham.
Fuckingham, I think they just shortened it to Effingham.
John Hawkins also got in on this as a privateer, of course. And then Sir Francis Drake, who was the second in command, also had his own little fleet of ships. So these guys are essentially commanding the fleet, but also commanding their own little like special ops team of ships that they have under their command.
Ironic, too, because Francis Drake is on something called the Revenge, and all he's ever done is pester the Spanish. There was one story a very, very long time before this happened, like at the beginning of Drake's privateer career. He was working on a ship that went over into the Caribbean, and basically they pulled into port to fix some ships. And the Spanish came in right after him and asked him what they were doing. They're like, we're just here to fix the ships. We're not doing anything important. Not knowing that this was a slaving vessel that was going over there to try to pick up some slaves off the island and take it back to England. And the Spanish are like, okay, well, yeah, just fix your ships. Keep on going to wherever you're headed. I think that they actually had like one very small English port in Brazil. They're like, yeah, sure, that's fine. As soon as they end up leaving the port in the Dominican Republic and taking off, the Spanish ships roll up on them and basically destroy. It was like 3 of the 5 ships that they had and chased them all the way back. So that was like the one flashpoint in Drake's mind, besides just the punishment of Catholics.
Hence revenge.
Yeah, to want to attack the Spanish. So I'm sure that plays into it. But Drake was known to the Spanish in a big way. They actually nicknamed him El Draco.
The dragon.
Yeah. So his legend had grown not only from all of the ports that he had hit when he circumnavigated the world to him coming down in Cadiz and hitting all of those ships and burning all those staves. And now the Spanish know that they're heading in to meet El Draco, who has his own little private version.
I think the Golden Hind was also one of the ships in his little armada, essentially. So English race-built galleons, they had merchant privateer vessels, which were, again, smaller and faster than the Spanish. That these things called Dutch flyboats. The Dutch were also using them over in the Netherlands, but basically just smaller little ships that can maneuver around. And then, this might be the one you were thinking, pinnaces.
Yeah, pinnaces, that's the one.
They were the small, fast cow ships. So the pataches were the Spanish version. The pinnaces were the English version of those. So
I can only hear so many English dudes on podcasts say pinnaces without a connection.
So as far as the cannons go, and this was going to, not only the ship design, but the cannons are going to be the biggest advantage that the English have here. The Spanish have basically the way that they're making their cannons. They're either making them out of brass or they're making them out of iron. And the way that they're making them out of iron is when they're doing the smelting and pouring and everything, to be able to have the barrel, essentially, they weren't drilling the barrel or doing anything like that.
Just a single pour?
It was a it was a single pour, but they would put clay to go ahead and hold the shape of the barrel.
Yeah.
Well, when clay chips and does all that kind of stuff and makes imperfections, these cannons, because also you're molding the clay, the calibers were kind of like off. Even if it was by a couple centimeters or anything like that, you're putting a cannonball in there, you're putting powder in there. If you're not getting the cannonball the right size and all that powder is exploding out the outsides of the you're not getting velocity or anything like that.
Yeah, you're breaking the seal and it's just puttering off the edge.
Correct. So they basically had less advanced cannons. Their cannons were less standardized, which basically means that a ship is carrying like 4 different types of cannonballs. And when you're searching around in battle, you're like, shit, does this one fit the gun that I'm firing? They also had, I want to say, the casting of their actual shot wasn't standardized either. So even if you grab the right one for the right caliber of cannon that you had, it might be a little smaller. It might be
ovular.
It could be. They said that the quality of it sometimes they would actually like be iron that would crack really easily. So if it goes and hits something solid, it's not doing as much damage. I think they said some of the balls were even made out of like masonry or stone that would just kind of shatter if they even didn't stay together coming out of the barrel of the cannon. Compared to the English cannons, they completely standardized the calibers. The ships would use maybe 1 or 2. So you could just count on just only 2 types of ammo being in place.
Heavy balls in your long guns.
Yep. All iron cannons. The manufacturing was much more precise. They had bored out barrels so they could make sure that they were completely smooth, not cast.
How? How did they, well, there's no electricity. What's the boring process?
It's got to be all hand driven or water wheel driven or something like that, man.
Wow.
So bored out, again, smooth bore, but they're still being bored out to be essentially
precise,
a lot more precise. And they designed this thing called the culverin. And it was a cannon, but when you look at it, it's longer, it looks more slender. And they found that because of the shape of it, the gunpowder burned more efficiently, which led to greater muzzle velocity and also a flatter trajectory.
Was it like an anti-aircraft gun?
Like how long, how tall those are. And kind of in that way with a longer barrel and everything.
A longer, slimmer barrel is going to allow for more velocity.
Exactly. But what that also does is that increases your effective range.
Yeah.
So now instead of having to get within 50 yards like you normally would in a broadside or even closer, they were able to fire these things and hit like a couple 100 yards away, which is well outside anything that the Spanish have with the ability to fire back at them. They would typically use like a 17-pound shot. So think of a 17-pound lead ball that's able to be fired more accurately from a few hundred yards away.
Yeah.
And then they were specifically designed to be on these ships for naval combat. They designed these cannons like, we need these things that can fire from ships, that can hit from distance. Whereas the Spanish were like, hey, we've got all this artillery laying around that we use for like sieges of fortresses and castles and all this kind of stuff. Let's just figure out how to put them on the ships and we'll just use that. That way, when we get where we're going, we can just use those cannons, put them onto land, and we can use those as our siege cannons.
Huge issue between 2-wheeled and 4-wheeled cannons.
When it comes to naval vessels, apparently it is a big deal. The English, if you're ever watching a pirate movie, this is hopefully going to explain some of the stuff that you're seeing during like naval battles and everything. So the way that the gun decks for the British were made is the cannons themselves would sit on these 4-wheeled carts, smaller wheels.
Yep.
The Spanish would be more akin to what you would think of a mobile piece of artillery, just 2 big wheels and then kind of a kickstand type deal on the back that they would sit on. So then you could just hook that up to a horse or something like that and tow it.
Basically like a tongue.
Yeah, exactly. Around. So when the British would fire, they have 4 wheels keeping this thing steady where they need to adjust it. What they also have is the cannon is secured to, so you have the gun port, and then you have the area of wood around the gun port. There's pulleys attached right there. Those pulleys then hook up to the rear of the cart of the cannon.
They built a recoil on them? Wow.
I'm nodding my head, yes. You can't tell that, but yes, I'm nodding my head. So they would fire. These things would launch back. They would be held by these things called breaching ropes. And then once they got them back, there was another pulley attached to the back of the cart behind it. Once it came back, the breaching ropes were basically used to absorb the recoil, because if there was nothing holding it, four-wheeled cart, it would shoot across the entire deck and could hit the guys behind, crushing them or knocking another cannon out the gun port or something like that.
It's an issue.
So the breaching things take the recoil. They also hold the cannon from sliding back too far. Once it slid back, the other pulley, and they think they have 6-man or 7-man teams working this. All of these guys are trained just as gunners, whereas the Spanish guys are like, you're just going to light the cannon, and then we're going to be next to the ship to board it, so you need to get up to the deck so you can, get over to the other side. These teams would then pull the cannon back a little bit more to where it was inside the ship. One guy would get in there, and he would first put his thumb over what they call the touch hole. It's where you pour the powder and where you light the fuse. Another guy would get in there with like this corkscrew device, go down to the barrel and scrape out everything to clean out the barrel, get out any of the embers, because if there's a dying ember in there, you go to load powder in there, that's where you get a misfire. He scrapes everything out, make sure he gets all the particles and what he can out. Another guy comes in with a wet sponge, throws it in there, cleans out the inside. That douses any embers that may be left in there. When he's done doing that, powder thing gets rammed in there, which is either wrapped in paper or something kind of a thinner material. That gets put in. Then the cannonball, or then wadding, which they said might have been made from either canvas, like sail patches, or like a rope. Then after that would go the shot, the ball. After that, they would then put in more wadding in case the ship tilted. The cannonball didn't just fucking roll out the end of it, so it held it in there securely.
Logical.
They would take like a small rod, stick it down the touch hole, piercing the bag of powder down there, and then use a powder horn to fill that all the way up to the very top. They would then just be able to take the pulleys that were on the breaching ropes, and those things that absorb the recoil would pull the gun right back into place and point it out the gun port. So they were able to fire multiple times. So much, in fact, and we're going to get kind of into the engagements and the tactics, but explaining the details on how the English were going about it explains why they're so successful. They would be able to come in and broadside from a distance against these ships while being well out of their range. What they'd then be able to do is essentially turn the other direction and get onto the other side and fire another broadside.
Yeah, I figured they were just spinning.
They were staying out. They were staying closer. Like, think of it in the sense of like probably staying closer to like their 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock area there to be able to hit them in a wider section of the ship, but stay out of range of either a broadside, which they weren't really worried about because of the distance, but also the front.
Well, and the way that the Spanish were set up.
Exactly. And as they are basically able to then launch these two broadsides, they would then start turning back the other direction. If they wanted to launch another one, the other side had already been reloaded because they were so practiced at it.
Was this also when they kind of created the circle fire method too? Where they would have groupings of ships that would just basically be in a circle. One would fire, tail off, follow the other one in line. The next one would come in and fire, tail off the other one in line. And by the time they were back to where they could fire off again, they were already reloaded and going.
I'm sure that was something, yeah.
Yeah, just the styling of how they were getting these shots off blew away what the Spanish were doing.
So the Spanish, from what they were saying during this, the whole point of them having these guns on the boat were not to engage in a ship-to-ship battle in the sense like you're thinking where we're just going to sit and go at each other with cannons. Again, it was, we're going to get close, launch off these big, scary fucking guns to disorient and do some damage to the other ship, and then guess what? Get up top, because that's where you're needed. These guns are no longer of use. Now we've grappled them, now we're getting close. They didn't really know how to reload these things on a ship.
They had no protocol.
Not only that, is these things are sliding all around as they're firing them because they're more unruly. So people are getting knocked over as they're firing from these gun decks. And not only that, they're so loaded with cargo and men for getting onto these other ships and the invasion and everything that guys are getting jostled around and they can hardly move down there. So a lot of these Spanish ships, they said, maybe fired once or twice in a day. Whereas these English ships are firing 8, 9, 10 times in these engagements. Not just individual cannons, volleys of all these cannons firing at the same time. Basically firing until they're out of shot.
It's still so funny that's like, for this being as intense as it is, because it's certainly intense being engaged in these and trying to dodge these cannonballs and stuff. But when you're talking about, you're like, yeah, each one of these guns fired 8-9 times in a day. It just sounds so little and minuscule, but then you think about like multiplying out how many guns there were on each ship. That's when it gets scary. But there are like certain lulls where I'm sure you're really excited, you're ready to fire, you fire, and then all of a sudden you're up on top of the deck and you're waiting for them to fire back. And you're waiting for them to fire back. And you're waiting for them to fire back. And you all start looking at your sundial watches and you're just waiting. And then 5 minutes later, they fire back. Like, it's not just a constant flow back and forth. There's these kind of intermittent times when you don't know what's going to happen.
And, you know, they're going after it's not like they're charging straight in to the fleets when they're having these engagements. They're looking for weaker ships. They're looking for stragglers. If they attack one ship, they can count on two of the, merchant ship or a smaller, less armed one. They can count on maybe two of those other ships peeling off and trying to come protect it, which then opens up more ships to your other guys that are sailing around here. But it had to be insanely frustrating when you're down there as a Spanish gunner and you're not hearing anything. And they're like, are we going to fire these things? And all that's happening is your shit is just getting lit up.
Yeah, you're getting rocked.
Which means when it hits, it's also hitting into those gun decks. So even before these guys would have a chance, they're just getting riddled with shot on these ships. They said there was instances where they would unleash broadsides into these Spanish ships from range, not even anywhere near where the Spanish could reach them. And they would get close enough, still out of range, but they could see blood pouring out of the gun ports where they had killed so many guys on the inside. Because again, it's not just the guys that are running the cannons down there. It's a bunch of soldiers that are all packed in like fucking sardines.
I've gained a new respect for splinters through doing this research.
Oh yeah, you think of a cannonball hitting a piece of wood and you're just like, I'm worried about the cannonball. You should be worried about the insane amount of shrapnel that will just cut your head off or pierce you in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, these aren't like splinters that you get in your finger. These are splinters that'll take an arm off, lop off a head.
This is, remember those stakes they would always use for like signs, yard signs and everything before they used like plastic or metal ones?
Yeah.
It was like that, just fucking whipping through the air.
High velocity.
But the best way to describe it is these English ships, they are fast gun platforms. They also had a shallower draft, so they could go places that these other Spanish ships couldn't follow. The Spanish ones are basically just like cargo fortresses.
Yeah, this is the way that I kind of explained it to you was the easiest way for me that just it clicked right away. This is Spanish jiu-jitsu against British boxing. Mm-hmm. You're sticking and moving, you're jabbing, you're throwing a hook every once in a while against the Spanish, while the Spanish are just kind of laying there on their backs trying to bring you in close enough to where they can grapple you and bring you down to the ground with them.
Yeah.
And that was...
Except the boxer has shit he can throw at you from a distance.
Yeah, like I say, he's throwing... he's
I'm thinking a lead ball that he can throw at you from the ground while you're on the ground.
He's getting in and out every single chance that he can get. And the first real engagement is so interesting to me, just knowing... Because we've been talking so much about the makeup of the Armada. Mm-hmm. The way that they have to set up in order to protect the merchant ships with these galleons on the outside and then on the inside, you would think, I don't know, I would go circular maybe.
You're talking about the crescent formation?
Yeah.
So like a half circle where you have your ships of the line, your galleons, the heavily armed ones, running as a screening picket, basically, in a half moon shape formation, and all of the other ships in the reason they did that prior to this is that they were always of the mind that they would be being attacked from the front or would be running up on somebody where those forward-facing guns would be able to be used. What ends up happening so Plymouth, where it's located, it's pretty far, I guess, northwest in England. It's one of the reason that the Navy...
Northwest or northeast?
Northwest, because northeast would be back by London. Plymouth is essentially quite a bit further on the
out
southern
towards
coast,
the Atlantic.
West. Yeah. Okay. So this is where essentially the bulk of the English Navy was at the time. And there were a group of people within kind of the Spanish Armada that were talking to Sidonia, and they were like, hey, we should probably try to hit these guys at Plymouth. We know that this is where their navy is. If we come in, we essentially have control of how we're going to engage them because we'll be coming in with the wind. If we catch them unaware, they're not even going to be able to get their sails up before we're able to just, put a hurting on them. And
we can't bury the lead of Drake and his bowling.
Well, okay, his balls.
Yeah, Drake and his balls.
Wasn't it just yard bowling? It's like bocce.
That's what I assumed. And watching a couple of the documentaries, that was kind of the thing that they used was bocce ball. So the Armada ends up being sighted in England July 29th off the Lizard in Cornwall that we were talking about. These beacons were lit. They were lit all the way back to Plymouth, where everybody was congregating. Mm-hmm. They go up to all of the main guys that are involved, and they say, hey, we spotted the Spanish. They're on their way. The Spanish are coming. The Spanish are coming.
Sir Francis. Dragon.
Francis Drake goes, great. We have enough time to finish our game of bowling.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly, I think they said that this was starting to be written into this history about 200 years after. So there's a good chance that wasn't what was going on.
The fleet was insanely slow, though, because it was having to keep pace. They were keeping pace with the slowest of their ships.
It was, at the same time, all of the wind was facing in towards the port of Plymouth. So all of the waves and everything, the sea was pushing in towards the port. So even if they weren't bowling, their ability to get out of Plymouth was going to be so tough that it wasn't going to matter time-wise. And this is what you're talking about when Sidonia goes to the council, and the council's like, hey, we go in and hit Plymouth. We got some ideas. Some of these ideas that we're thinking of, the English are going to end up using afterwards that we don't even know about. But if we go in and we hit them in Plymouth, all of a sudden we can just go ahead and jump on land there, and we can start our land campaign in to try to take over London.
Yeah.
Sidonia had been given strict orders by Philip II that they're to go up to the lowlands in Dunkirk and meet
Parma. You don't stop until you hit Calais.
Once you get up there into Calais and you get Parma, you load all the rest of the soldiers on, then you go over. So they end up just not hitting Plymouth when they potentially could have. Now, could they have taken the Navy in Plymouth? Yeah, there's a chance. There's a pretty good chance that they could have done it. They had, maybe a third of the amount of men that they were going to use for the invasion force, because the other 2/3 was still up.
With Parma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to have less men doing it. But at the same time, the fact that he didn't want to go against Philip's words is, I guess that's a good leader. You're not listening to the experts.
That's a huge what if moment.
Yeah.
Like, what if that changes? Because here's the thing, too. They don't even have to land invading troops. If they do enough damage to those ships, what's going to stop them from then just going up to Calais and transporting them all across?
True.
They just have to take away their ability to basically make it hard for them to complete the seaborne part of the invasion. So Plymouth gets past. They're floating through the English Channel with this giant crescent-shaped formation, all the warships up front. And this isn't even a situation of like, hey, we passed by Plymouth and we saw the warships and we were like, hey, they don't even get close. They're staying closer to the French side of it and everything.
Probably smart.
Yep. And as, the game of balls ends up getting finished up, Drake makes his way down. Howard's there, the other guy, Hawkins. And they're like, okay, even though the wind's not really on our side, it's pushing in right now, we probably still need to try to get out of here. So, and this is some interesting nautical shit. If people can make it make sense to me, I would love that. But they call it tacking. And basically what tacking is it's what you have to do if you're sailing where the wind is coming directly against you. Like you're trying to head, let's say, north, and the wind is heading directly south. Tacking is basically trying to get to that point by making a series of zigzags where you can catch just enough of the wind to keep you moving forward, which I don't get because these sails seem to be pretty fixed as far as just left to right. And so in order to get wind behind your sail, if it's coming directly against you, I feel like you have to almost be going kind of back the other direction, even if it's at an angle. But I'm not a sailor, but it's apparently a thing. So they end up.
Wonder if maybe it's turning you as it's hitting the back part of the sail, and then the front part of the sail is catching a little bit of wind.
Because your rudder is still forcing you in a direction. So it's not just the wind. So you're just trying to use that to curve. I don't know.
Yeah. Magic.
Yeah. So they end up being able to tack their fleet out, and all of a sudden, they're behind the Spanish Armada. They're at the weakest point. They're where the slowest ships are probably.
Not only that, they got the wind gauge.
They got the wind gauge. The wind gauge is essentially the direction of the wind. So
it's acceleration. It's a gas pedal.
It's not only that, it's complete control over the engagement. So let's put it this way. The Spanish Armada is heading east. The wind is blowing from west to east.
Mm-hmm.
When the English fleet rolls up on them, they can stay back further behind them and literally just kind of zigzag firing off these shots. If anyone from the Armada, any of those galleons or, armed ships want to come help, they got to try to turn around against the wind and then try to tack back. Or do they have to just slow down and let everyone catch up and just be kind of dead in the water waiting for them to catch up? And then all of a sudden the English are just like, yeah, we're not getting in front of you. Like, we'll just keep using the wind in our more agile ships to outrun you and get in better positions.
By the time you turn around, you have no forward momentum. So
yeah,
we're fine doing what we're doing.
So they basically are just getting picked off in the back while Sidonia's just like, got to get to Calais.
Yeah, and this wasn't a massive force. This was, I believe it was 55 ships that ended up taking off. And as far as that engagement goes, it's kind of the British trying to find that depth gauge as to how close they can be to be effective while still staying out of the range of the Spanish. And the first engagement doesn't yield a lot of damage. It's just more of a feeling out process because they know, and this is the other very smart part of this that I didn't really think of until the last days, you're basically pushing them into a fish trap.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get to a point to where the English Channel at the White Cliffs of Dover and Calais, is that where it is, that it becomes the skinniest point?
Yes, yeah.
So everything is starting to track in that you're chasing them into.
It's starting to narrow.
Yeah. So eventually your engagements are going to get closer and closer. And even though you're not scoring damage this first time, if you can figure out the depth that you can be, or the distance that you can be effective and they can stay ineffective.
And I mean, you're still causing damage.
Yeah.
You're just not causing sinking ship damage.
You're not blowing holes.
You're not, and that's the other thing too, is they're having to feel out and say, it like you said, it's a guessing game. They're firing these things and they're like, we're getting hit. Someone with the spyglass sees something fly up, but are we penetrating the hull? Do these things are we close enough that the velocity is still carrying these cannonballs through? And how many shots are we missing? Do we need to get a little bit closer? It's also got to be a game of, hey, let's try to fuck with these guys and get them to engage us and try to fire, and let's see where their cannonballs land. And all of a sudden they let off a volley from a Spanish ship and they're like, oh shit, they go like 50 yards. Okay. It's like in softball, baseball, move in.
Yep.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Well, then after they launch the first volley, they're like, all right, let's see how long it takes them to reload. Let's see how long it takes them to fire again. It's like 2 hours.
The English Navy has got to be like, we heard them fire once, but we haven't heard them fire again. We fired some. Have anyone heard? I've just heard us firing. And so they harass them so much that it does have to change Sidonia's tactics a little bit. And they're like, okay, what we need to do is we need to get somewhere that's a little bit defensible, that we can actually set up maybe a position where we could be safer at anchor while we, shuttle people over or do whatever. So I think this is where they actually head for the Isle of Wight. Is that correct?
I have August 1st. There's another engagement off of Portland. This time the Spanish have the weather gauge favoring them. Smaller English ships just continue to outmaneuver these large Spanish ships. They avoid the grapple every single time. They're sticking and moving. They're pulling in as close as they can. They're firing, then they're pulling back out. Spanish support ends up being needed because the Santa Ana and the Nuestra Senora del Rosario end up colliding with some of the other Spanish ships. And the Nuestra, or we'll just call it the Rosario, it's an important ship.
It's a payday ship, isn't it?
It's a payday ship. It's a very, very big deal because once you end up getting up to pick up your guys up in the lowlands, everybody's going to want to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would probably... How would you want to get paid there? Would you want to wait until you get done with the voyage? Or would you want to walk around with a bunch of gold ducats in your pockets while
If I'm going to die, man, I'm spending that shit. Yeah, give me the money.
But where?
You're buying stuff within the baggage train that's going with you, or merchants that are, following an army and selling shit. You're paying for whores because there's going to be ladies of the night in every village and you're going to want to, partake. You don't have the ship.
But they're not letting you off the boats because you're going to run.
Fine. I want to die at least with the money.
Yeah.
I'm going to die without the money or I'm going to die with the money. Give me the money.
I just figure it'd be harder to be running around the ship with a bunch of gold coins
give
in
it
your
to
pockets.
me. It's a good problem to have.
Be pulling your little Spanish puffy pants down as you're trying to load up the cannons.
So this is also, I believe, taking place kind of at night, correct?
Well, this was August 1st that this happens. When night falls between August 1st and August 2nd, that's when Drake gets a little itchy.
So he's out leading a squadron or whatever you want to call it of ships going out. And he either sees or catches word of this ship that's basically sitting there. And this is the Rosario, you said, right? So he's like, I gotta see what's on. He doesn't know it's a payday ship. He just knows it's a ship. It's disabled. I think it may have been abandoned. I think someone may have come and pick up the crew.
I think he knew. I think he could smell gold.
You think he knew what type of ship you know what? He probably was aware of what type of ship they would transport money on. Mm-hmm. So he's like, okay, I don't want the other guys having to have their share of this or anything like that. So he's leading the squadron with like a lantern that's lit at his stern. I just see him doing this, walking over and opening it and licking his fingers and being like, we're just going to go ahead and take a little detour as he pinches it and puts it out. And then just has his guy turn toward the ship. And basically leaves these guys in the dark. They end up having to scatter a little bit and everything.
Big problem come morning time.
But that's a morning problem. So now you end up having Drake get to the Rosario. And was this one of the instances? I think there may have still been Spanish.
Captain was still on board.
I think he rolls up on this and he tells them he's got his matches lit. And he also tells them who he is. So he's like, the dragons come. And immediately the Spanish ship is like, fucking take it, man. Take whatever you want. And they end up finding, and I love the fact that I find out where this term comes from. He takes 50,000 gold ducats. I love the word ducat.
Yeah.
Shekels, ducats.
They also seize a shitload of gunpowder.
Oh, yeah. That they can definitely do with.
Yep.
It may not be as, I think they said it was a little bit inferior, but that just means you got to get a little bit closer, and they know they can do that.
This caused a little bit of issue in the British Navy, not to mention the ships being scattered, but I believe it was Howard that was quoted afterwards as saying that if Francis Drake thinks that he can go off and sneak away and take all this without us getting our shares, he's crazy. I will make him spend the best blood in his abdomen. So basically, if he thinks that all these 50,000 ducats are just going to him, he's going to disembowel him.
I want to say that they said that he turned over 25,000 of them to Elizabeth, and he's like, yes, this is all they had. Finder's fee, baby. So after that engagement, ships are kind of scattered come morning. He's rich, though. Come on. And there is, again, Isle of Wight comes into play where the Spanish Armada wants to try to find a place they can kind of set up shop. And found this out too. Don't know how I didn't know it, but the Soylent. I've heard that term many times.
Soyland?
The Soylent. The Soylent is the stretch of water between the Isle of Wight and England, the mainland.
Oh, I thought it was a meal replacement drink.
It might be, or Soylent Green or whatever that shit was that they used that was in the 70s, that scare shit.
Movie? Yeah, there was people.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. It was
Soylent Green.
But yeah, that's what the area between the Isle of Wight and the England, the mainland, is actually called.
Okay.
So it's also a place that would be pretty fucking defensible because you don't have to worry about, it's water's calmer, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Doesn't end up working out for him because they end up getting harassed again and chased out of the Soylent. And so at that point, I think he's like, all right, this is what happened because I detoured from, I can't even remember the king's name, Philip.
Yep.
King Philip's plan. Okay, now we do need to head for Calais. So we're heading that direction.
We also forgot to mention, on both sides of this fight, they both believed that they were fighting with God's best intentions in mind.
Oh, buddy, this was a crusade for the Spanish. The Pope blessed the flag.
Well, there was also
indulgences.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was also the English belief that Protestantism was going to outdo Catholicism again.
So it was a matchup of Catholic God versus Protestant God.
Exactly.
Okay.
Same guy, just maybe different. He was bipolar, maybe. I don't know.
Is this Jim Carrey in Liar Liar in the bathroom where he's kicking his own ass?
Yeah, it's a situation where each time one of these sides gets the win gauge, they're like, yes, God is on our side. Mm-hmm. And then each time the other one has it, they're like,
the Lord has fought in our direction. I don't know why it's French, but
we didn't do enough. Well, we'll talk about the French coming up because I think the French coming up's pretty damn funny. Mm-hmm. So you have these two people or these two sides who believe that they're on this religious mission. And so far, stuff just is not going well on the Spanish side in the least. It's just everything is kind of coming up with all of the issues that Parma's plan pointed out earlier and that Santa Cruz's plan pointed out earlier.
This kind of reminds me in a way of the Battle of Britain because you had the English who were, again, their ships are just made for naval warfare. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be cargo carriers because all they got to do is just turn around and go back to port and they can reload, they can get more shot, they can get more gunpowder. And then at the same time, when other ships are coming in, hey man, what worked for you? What did you find out about this? One of the things that Drake finds out when he boards that ship is, of course, they're searching the ship. He's on board. He's looking around. He's like, these guns suck. These are not naval guns. Look how close these things. And he comes back and he's giving them that information. He's like, they can only fire at us a couple times. Yeah. And so all these guys, I got to imagine, are sharing all this information when they're back in port and they're just adapting to these tactics. Like, you know, if we approach them from this side, what did you find out? Like, where were they able to shoot at you from? Well, they weren't able to shoot at us.
Yeah, we're
they just say, how many shots did you take? And they just all pause and then just start laughing.
Everybody just holds up one finger. So back to the communication side of this. The first letter, I guess the first courier that is sent to Parma from the Armada leaves on August 1st from Sidonia's camp. It doesn't end up reaching Parma until August 6th. Now, in any other scenario, if you have two static groups that are sending letters back and forth, 5 days is a lot, but it's not going to affect you because neither one of you are moving. Mm-hmm. 5 days while the Armada is heading up the English Channel is going to be a massive amount of time because he's basically being chased by the people that he's trying to bring the letter to. So by the time he's to make it to Parma, the news is already 5 days late.
Yeah. Unless when they went to Isle of Wight and everything. And even at that point, it's just like they're going back just to see what Parma's status is. But at the same time, he's going to take 3 or 4 days to get back to you to tell us what his status is. And then what ends up happening is they get a report from Parma. He's down to like 16,000 soldiers because of the disease that's been running through his camp.
Yep. And I believe they said that Sidonia sent off, I think it was 3 or 4 couriers. They all showed up around August 6th. Mm-hmm. So he sent them at different times and different days.
They want to say that they dropped someone off. They would try to do different methods. So like one of the ships would drop a guy off like on the French coast and be like, you need to find a horse, dude, and try to get to these guys.
Oh, and yeah, we forgot to mention during this whole entire time, France has go ahead and declared their neutrality. Mm-hmm. They're not dealing with this Anglo-Spanish war. They're like, you guys have fought against us for so long. Duke it out amongst yourselves.
Don't come on our land, though.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
So as they continue to cruise up the English Channel, the British are kind of getting a strategy down that is working really, really well.
It's kind of a divide and conquer thing.
Yeah.
If we can, the way that we're going to be able to beat these guys, I mean, we can go ship to ship with them pretty easily. But if we can just pick off stragglers, if we can force them to scatter and then pick off small groups, that's what's going to work best for us.
If we break ourselves into these 4 lines, basically, and we each target a specific ship that's maybe weaker or slower or anything like that, it's going to draw all of these galleons to try to come back to us. By the time they're there, we've already destroyed or critically wounded the ship that
And have moved on to the next one, and now those ships are exposed.
It's just a very smart strategy. Like you say, this divide and conquer of these 4 kind of lines that go after certain targets. The Armada is still holding this crescent shape fairly well. And so the British aren't exactly scoring major victories yet. But if you can break up the crescent, everything changes.
Yeah. Well, one way to do that is, so the Spanish Armada ends up getting to Calais.
Yep, August 7th.
Yep. They end up kind of putting at anchor and everything like that. Again, they have the more heavily armed ships further out to kind of like screen and everything. I'm sure they have scout ships out there. And as they're sitting on their decks, they look out toward the darkness, out toward England, and they see little things start to glow. And they're like, what the fuck is that? Well, they're probably not what is that. They probably know, because this is something that's been done throughout naval history for a very long time. The British have taken, I want to say, was it like 8 of their ships?
Yes.
So they took 8 of their ships.
The night of August 7th.
They basically load them up with gunpowder and pitch and all this flammable stuff. And they have these brave as shit guys basically sail them in, and the wind is at their back. So they have the wind gauge at this point as well.
Did they have anybody on them? I thought they were unmanned.
They had to have somebody on it to get it aimed at this giant flotilla that's sitting outside of Calais.
And then it was lit?
Then they would light it. They would then get off on a boat that was next to it, like a rowboat or a smaller sailing vessel.
Little penis.
Yep, little penis. And then they would take that out and then head back and haul ass. So they light these 8 ships on fire, these fire ships. And they basically are just like, it's like in any movie when you see someone about ready to jump out of the car, they take it and they tie the steering wheel to something and then they bail out. It's kind of what it is. So they light these things on fire and basically send in these flaming bombs at the Spanish fleet. Now, Sidonia comes out and is giving out signals and all this kind of stuff, and is basically like, hey, we're at anchor. We really can't move anywhere. Cut the anchors for you. You don't have time to actually raise the anchor and get out of here. So you have guys down at the anchor line cutting these things free, and a lot of them do. They get these ships free, which at the same time I'm thinking about it, what are the odds one of those fire ships is going to fucking hit you, right?
In a crescent shape, it's not like it's going into a concentrated area.
Yeah, I mean, it's so spread out that all these ships are. So it's like a terror tactic. It's like the what if, because if wood and fire, if this thing even gets close, it could catch this ship on fire and burn us down.
Well, and that's the whole thing, too. When you're on water, you can't just like stay in one space. Just because it's drifting towards you doesn't mean that it can't start drifting the same direction that you're trying to pull off. Like it's,
and you don't even have your sails down because you were trying to sit at anchor without moving too much.
Not to mention, if the wind is able to blow these towards you, trying to get out of its way,
they're coming in at speed. Like they're right with the wind. And
so you would think all of these boats cutting their anchors, they're doing it to save themselves, when really they've just kind of sealed their own fate.
Pretty much, for the ones that dropped it, because no one's carrying spare anchors, man. And there's no going down to get it. So once these boats lose their anchor, they've lost their anchor. And a lot of them end up cutting free. I want to say that a few of the fire ships end up getting grappled by smaller ships, and they like tow them out of the way.
3 of them, they towed them onto land.
5 of them end up coming in. I didn't see how many actually hit their targets.
Nothing.
But they caused enough havoc in having these ships essentially scatter, get disorganized and everything, that the next morning you get all these ships from the English fleet coming in to basically mop up all of this, everything's in chaos on the Spanish side. They're still trying to account for ships. Ones that have drifted off are trying to get back in control. They don't have a way to hold themselves in place. And all of a sudden, the English roll up with these long-range cannons and just start having a field day.
And not to mention, in the chaos of all of them cutting anchor and trying to get out of the way of these boats, they're crashing into each other. They're taking damage just basically running into each other.
Which way is the wind blowing? Right toward the coast.
Yep.
Your anchor was there to hold you in place to keep you from going up on the rocks. So now all of a sudden you're trying to get your sails down, the anchor's cut free, and you're just drifting toward the shore.
And you're drifting towards each other, and there's nothing that you can do about it. I'm sure when morning came, it was just utter panic.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see all that and to be in that position as far as, like, now we have light. Now we can see where everybody is. Oh, God, everybody is so far away from each other. How do you start getting back into communication? Because it's not like you can radio from ship to ship.
No.
You're still probably close enough that you can yell, but you're not yelling at the ships that are that much further out.
No, and you've got the sound of the canvas from the sails and everything going back and forth. You've got the sound of the water of the boat movement. They said that...
Hand signals, maybe?
They said he didn't use hand signals.
Really?
He would fire off certain cannon shots. A number of cannon shots would signify certain shit. Like if you fired off 3 cannon shots, it's like, help, I'm fucking under attack.
Doesn't that come back to bite him in the ass?
No, it only comes back to bite him because the other guys know what it means, but then they're like, we thought it meant something else.
Yeah, it's a major success as far as how this whole fire ship thing goes. And I guess the English had called back to shore or sent a courier of their own back to shore, said, hey, we're getting them into a position where we could really use fireboats to make this happen. Can you please send us ships that we can use as fireboats, just junkers that basically float and have a bunch of pitch and shit on them? Just send us those and we'll go ahead and take care of it. Those 8 boats didn't get back in time to the point where, like, we know that they're sitting here anchored in Calais. We got to do what we got to do. Choose 8 ships, load everybody else and all the cargo and everything onto other ships. We'll sacrifice these 8 just to cause this chaos.
Yeah.
It worked out perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, nobody was burned, so nobody actually got hit by them. But with the anchors lost, you don't have time to really do much. And there's a question as far as the idea probably would have been better just to try to continue on to Dunkirk and then anchor there. But it was...
If you have an anchor.
Yeah, well, instead of staying in Calais like they
where
did.
They know you're... Yeah.
Yeah, to just keep moving, to not port there and to not anchor down. And they said that it was just to a point to where Sidonia was just so rattled that he just needed some time to think, and that was where they were going to turn off. And even getting to Dunkirk, we haven't talked about the problem with Dunkirk yet. Besides the shallowness of the shores, it's now being patrolled because the Dutch have all of their flyboats in there that are basically running a blockade to stop any of
Parma's guys from getting out.
Yes. And it would be super important for Parma to be able to get a courier down in time to the Armada and let them know this.
He can't, though, because it has to go out on a boat.
And not only that, you can't because it showed up August 6th to let you know where they were.
Yeah.
So there's just, the communication has bungled everything in this scenario.
That's what I'm saying. It was set to fail. Like, your timing would have to be perfect in order for any of this to work out. And there was just less than 1% chance that it was going to work out.
So the dawn of August 8th, after the fire ships end up hitting, Sidonia is struggling to try to get the Armada back in line. They were outside of this place called Gravelines. Gravelines?
I think it was Gravelines.
Gravelines. And the attack from the English just comes again. They were so pumped about what they'd done the night before, and they were ready to start really making some cash here. The English determined the safe distance to inflict the damage on the Armada was right around 100 yards to be able for them to penetrate, not be able to get hit.
Okay, I love this. There's something called healing. And
sounds familiar.
Okay. So imagine a ship is sailing and it's taking evasive maneuvers. So you have a Spanish Armada ship. It is sailing north. You're firing at it and you are back in its, let's say, 7 or 8 o'clock position.
Okay.
Which way are you going to turn to get away from it?
Towards 9 o'clock.
You're going to turn toward
Peel
the
off.
side?
Turn away from where the ship is.
If it's back at 7 o'clock, you're not going to, if it's back to your back left, are you going to turn left or are you going to turn right?
Back to your back left. You're going to turn right.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about the British ship that was firing, where they would peel off.
So what they would do is, when these ships go to turn, they start to lean to the side. An area that's normally under the water line is exposed.
Oh, yes.
And they got to the point where they would, when these ships are taking evasive maneuvers, they would position themselves to be on that same side that was then coming up out of the water and being exposed. And were so accurate with their shot, that's when they would start firing to hit it. They didn't have to hit below the water line. They had to hit just where it was, because the next time that they went to the other side of that ship and had it turn, it's now putting that other section deep in the water, and those sections that weren't submerged before that have holes in them now are. So by making them evade back and forth, they're just putting holes in the sides of the ship and water's flowing in as they turn to each side.
You don't have to hit below the water line. You just have to hit where it goes below the water, I guess, is that thinking?
Yeah, so like if you have the water line, let's just say it's 5 feet up from where the bottom of the ship is. I know it's much deeper than that. In a turn, let's say you're turning to the left. The right side could submerge 3 or 4 feet down lower than that while it's turning. You just put holes in that 3 to 4 feet. If that thing's going straight, maybe it's not taking on water, but you start making it turn hard into that direction, that's just forcing water through those holes.
It's a pretty bad deal, especially for the guys below deck.
Yeah.
As they're hitting and they're starting to penetrate at this distance, they conserved just enough gunpowder and shot because they knew they were going to need one big, large engagement. They didn't know exactly where it was going to come, but Gravelines just happened to be the spot where this is going to need to happen. So everything that they held in reserve, they were giving them hell. Just every single thing they could give them. Not only were they firing into the sides to try to penetrate, they were lobbing shots onto the decks.
They got close enough at times where they said guys like in the crow's nest were exchanging, could hear each other talk, and were exchanging arquebus fire.
I think they said the closest they got, because they were within shouting range, they said it was like 50 yards.
Yeah.
Which, again, feels huge, but when you're firing a 17-pound ball, it's going to go a long way.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to hit hard the closer you get.
And all you have to do is like, okay, let's just keep swooping in here and have them try to broadside us or have them fire the cannons. Because we know as soon as those cannons go off, that side is completely exposed and we can get as close as we want because they can't load these things again.
Well, the other brilliant thing that they did was they actually baited the Spanish to fire first that day. Mm-hmm. So get their shot out of the way. Pretty much everybody will be safe after that. Let them get their nut, and then it's just free-for-all for us all day long. Mm-hmm. It's such a brilliant strategy as far as just get the dangerous stuff out of the way. Broadside, broadside, broadside. And they're killing gunners as they're hitting below deck. They're killing guys that are on deck as they're lobbing onto the deck. After 8 hours of continuously firing, they just began to run out of ammo. Mm-hmm. Like they were loading anything that they could. They were throwing chains in there. They were throwing probably some hardtack biscuits in there to see what that would do. This is when they got creative with stuff to see what damage could do.
Yeah. They said kind of in the comparison about like ammunition running out, shot and everything, that the wrecks that they're going to, we're going to talk about the wrecks here in a second, but the wrecks that they've been able to like identify as Spanish Armada ships and everything, none of them are short on shot. Because they never had an opportunity to really have to use it or to be effective in using it. So that's got to be the most frustrating. You're sitting there on deck and your guys are just getting torn apart and you can't get close enough because every time you turn toward them and try to, they're just like, nope, and just steer away.
Yeah, are you not down there in the lab trying to figure out, like, if we just pack one cannon as tightly as we can with as much gunpowder as we can, which we'll talk about here in a second what happens, how far can we lob one of these cannons? What's our max distance? Are you not trying to test to see which your better cannons are to try to fire? Like, you have to be doing something.
The guys really aren't gunners, though. They're just like, the things are loaded, and their job is to basically take the little glowing thing, and when they're getting ready to, board, tap it, and then go. Like, they're not trained for this kind of stuff. So
I'm still trying to figure it out.
I mean, that's the thing, too, is like, yeah, we could try to, it's the doctrine thing. Remember, like, when we talked about, like, the Imperial Japanese Navy, they had that really rigid doctrine, and they wouldn't, stay away from it. Now think of trying to change tactics with the communication abilities that these guys had. And the guy that's in charge has never been in a naval battle or has no experience doing it. So even if he wanted to change tactics, it would probably be even worse.
Yeah, it's just that they were hosed. There was nothing that they could do.
So no way to get Parma's men out to the boats. The Dutch are patrolling the shores. The actual fleet, the Spanish Armada, is just constantly under attack and busy trying to stay away from the British or the English at this point. What do? You
just got to run.
You do. And unless the wind is blowing against you, which it does at this point, when they get the idea, they're like, okay, what are our options at this point? Well, we can turn around, try to go back through the English Channel and get back to Spain. You mean go back the way where all of their ports are, that they're heading back and reloading and coming back out? You want to go through that? I mean, we could take the Walk of Shame all the way up north along the east coast of England and Scotland, loop around and come down the west coast of Ireland, and then get back to Spain that way. Kind of have to at that point.
Yeah, what are your other options?
So the threat at this point, though, is because the wind is coming in from the south, or it's coming north to south. So they can't go north. It's threatening to blow these ships onto this area that's, I believe it's kind of near Dunkirk. And the Dutch that had taken over, all the markers that were on the shallow spots where ships were supposed to avoid, they just went out there and moved them and got rid of them. They're like, good luck telling where the shoals are, bitch. So you got ships that are getting, onto reefs that are being, hit by, crashing into rocks that are being beached and everything like that. You have ships that have been damaged enough and are taking on enough water that their only option is basically looking at what would be Belgium and France and being like, run her aground, run her onto the beach. And then at that point, guess what? You're not in your friendly area.
Well, you're in a neutral area. But this is where things get real fun for the French. This is where the French finally put their feet down. As they were running these ships aground in France, and as the Spanish were trying to load these guys onto the other ships, the English ships all kind of start to maybe take a little page out of Drake's book, and they start to get close to these ships that have run aground to maybe see if they can find, 50,000 more ducats or anything like that.
Shallower draft, man, they can pull up on these things.
Yep.
Can you imagine too? You've grounded. You're like, we can't sink. We're good, right? I mean, they can keep shooting at us, but we definitely cannot sink.
Yeah.
And then the ship just is approaching you like, oh, they're totally going to get stuck too. Like, we're going to be able to board them and everything like that. And it just ends up sweeping past you and just keeps firing. Then eventually someone's just like, do you guys give up yet?
Yeah. It is, they swoop in to start, maybe checking for whatever they can find on these ships. You start hearing the guns go off from France.
Wallets and jewelry on the table. So yeah, France comes out to play because they're like, there's probably some good shit on these boats. They end up having to fire at the English just to scare the English away from some of these wrecks so they can loot them themselves.
You limey fucks, that's on our land. Mm-hmm. You don't touch that. That's French property now. I can't really think of a worse way, and we kind of talked about it last night. This is like the worst walk of shame home possible. Mm-hmm. And that's not even the worst part about it, because the shame's not the worst part about it. So the British continue to chase, and I'm sure it was probably them trying to just steer them into the worst possible conditions that they could.
Yeah, I mean, they had to make sure that invasion wasn't an option for them in any way, shape, or form. So once the wind, thankfully for the Spanish Armada, the wind ends up changing, and they're like, oh my God is telling us to get the fuck out of here. So the Armada and, well, what's left of it. And we're going to go over numbers here at the end, and they're not going to sound super impressive from the combat, like the naval engagement side. But this is basically, the British are just trying to get them out of there. They are the same way the Battle of Britain was. We just need to inflict as much damage as we can and then get them out of here. We're not looking to completely decimate this fleet because in turn that would probably expend our resources.
Yeah.
So as they start heading north, the British basically just follow them up as far as Scotland?
The Firth of Forth.
The Firth of
My
Forth.
favorite part of Scotland.
So pursue them up to that point, and then probably knowing what that area is like up there getting closer to the North Sea, they're like, good luck, and turn around.
Have fun with that shit. You guys definitely haven't been up here.
Because guess what happens? You even try to go aground. Do you know what the Scottish are going to do to you?
Yep. Yeah, those
They
fuckers
may not like us, the English. They definitely don't like you either.
You think that we don't look tough in our wigs and our puffy shirts? Wait till you get up there and those guys' faces are painted blue. Mm-hmm. Things are going to change. Wait till they're naked and their faces are painted blue. You're not going to want to park up there. They end up, it was August 9th. The Armada is forced to the north like we were talking about. August 12th is when they stopped being chased. That's how long it took them because of the wind that they were fighting. Mm-hmm. And the English were out of ammunition, so it's not like they can keep trying to engage them. And like you say, they don't need to because they're just trying to shuttle them out. Mm-hmm. Defeat doesn't have to, or victory isn't dependent on defeat. Yeah. Victory is dependent on just getting rid of them. So, of course, after that happens and they get up there on August 12th to finally push them off, 110 vessels were what rounded Scotland. August 20th, the Gulf Stream starts carrying these ships closer into the coast as they're coming down along. We also have, where was it?
I do want to say some ships probably caught back up and joined them because they came in with 117. I think they got a few more ships that kind of probably caught their repairs and kind of came back to join them. So that's kind of what we're talking about, numbers game here. Even if they lost 20 ships to these naval engagements, that's still 20 ships, but the main mission, they stopped the invasion. So however you want to slice it, even if they would have sunk one ship and prevented the invasion of England, that's what they were attempting to do.
Well, you gotta rally the English on land, right?
Yeah.
And because there's a great chance that this invasion force is definitely still coming, so you really want to pump your people up. You could wait till August 18th until the threat is all the way on the other side of Scotland and the Armada's not coming anywhere close to you. You still have Parma working in the lowlands. Maybe there's a little bit of a scarce place.
Low risk, high reward for this rallying. Yeah.
Tilbury. Nowhere near where the invasion is going to happen.
No, it's like it's like the estuary of the Thames. It's like further down the Thames or something like that. But here's the thing. Again, news is not traveling fast. They just know that the English are fighting the Spanish Armada. People know what the Spanish Armada's reputation is. They know that they're underdogs in this situation. Their assumption has to be, how can our Navy hold these guys off? They're eventually going to get over here. That's what the common people have to believe. If you have, and you're in the know, and you're getting reports back from these engagements and everything, and you know where the Armada's going, the people don't know that the Armada's not still in Calais or something like that. They don't know where the fuck this Armada is. It could be, that's why she went down to the where was it called?
Tilbury. Tilbury.
Yeah, because there was the thought that if an invasion is going to happen, why wouldn't they try to come invade closer to London first, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Elizabeth gets out there and she's wearing the full plate armor, isn't she? Mm-hmm. Just decked out on top of
astride a white horse.
I'm not going to read the whole thing because it just sucks.
Just read the tagline.
Yeah. Well, my loving people, we have been persuaded. That's not how an English old woman sounds. My loving people.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
We have been persuaded by some that are careful of our safety.
I feel like you're just doing an old American woman at this point.
I can't do both. It's
you get English or old.
Yeah.
Take your pick. Okay, English.
Okay. Hello. We have been persuaded by some. Oh, I
I'm so happy right now.
that are careful of our safety, to take heed we commit ourselves to the armed multitudes for fear and treachery. And she goes on and on and on. And then she goes, down to my God, and for my kingdoms, and for my people, my honor and my blood, even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. And to think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any principal of Europe or any prince of Europe should dare to invade our borders of my realm, to which rather than to dishonor should grow by me, I myself will take up arms. I myself will be your general, judge, and rewarder, and of every one of your virtues in the field. She couldn't even try to point to herself and be like, I'm going to fight like a queen. She
I
just
feel like
had
that's
to,
what she was getting at.
but she kept saying king.
I mean, yeah, she wants it. Here's the thing, too, man. Think of it like she was only there because the sun. Like, I feel like there was some type of, when a queen was in power there, I feel like it was just, to a lot of people, a waiting period just for like a son or a king to take over.
Placeholder.
That's kind of what I feel like. But what I love about this is she's basically up there being like, you know what? These motherfuckers are trying to come in here and end our English way of life. And guess what? I may be a woman, but I'm also Henry's daughter. And if these guys show up, I'm going to end up leading you guys. We're going to kick the shit out of them. And everyone's like, yeah. Not knowing that the fleet, that the Armada, is all the way on the other side of Ireland right now, heading back towards Spain. They don't know that, so they're just like, wow, Elizabeth has really got our back in this.
We're safe as long as this feeble old bird that just told us she's not a great fighter, but she has the strength of the inner strength of a king.
News finally makes it, and they're just like, someone from Ireland just said that they saw the Armada already on their side. She's like, see how fast they traveled? They got out as fast as they possibly could. In fact, almost unbelievably fast.
We just got word that William Wallace gave him the finger on the western side of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty much gone. I think we're safe here.
Just bent over and lifted the kilts. Gave me the old Scottish goodbye. Is that what the Irish goodbye is, when you just don't tell anyone that you're leaving the party?
Scottish goodbye is when you hang your ass out of your kilt as you're leaving?
Goodbye is when you make sure everybody knows you're leaving the party.
Yeah, and as they're leaving this party and they're getting the Scottish goodbye, they're kind of trying to figure out how this is all going to work, because obviously if you're going further out into the ocean, you're going to have to deal with less swells coming into shore. What they didn't know about, and they, like I said, 110 vessels around the north of Scotland on August 20th. They didn't know about the jet stream or the Gulf Stream. They didn't understand that there's a high pressure bit of wind.
A strip of wind.
Yeah. That just basically sends you careening to the east. And as they think that they're pushing further out into the ocean, they're actually catching this Gulf Stream that's carrying them in closer to the coast.
Why are we moving backwards?
The sail. Uh-huh. The sail's being sucked the wrong direction.
It's bent the other way.
It pushes them right into these windstorms that just batter them along the coast. All of these already damaged ships that you were talking about earlier now have one big missing issue.
That thing that holds them in one place?
The thing that stops you from getting battered against the coast that you cut to get away from the fire ships before.
And it's a catch too, because the anchor's only effective as long as it can touch the bottom, which means you already have to get close enough to the coast for it to be shallow enough to do that. Mm-hmm. The ones that have anchors are probably like, hey, we're just going to wait this out. The ones that don't have the anchors, I just see like a ship lowering its anchor, and they're like, are we secured? They're like, we're secured. And they just see another ship just gently flying by, and they're like, we don't have an anchor, and just watch them as the ship is crushed on the rocks of the Irish coast.
You got guys just like half-assed trying to throw ropes over the ship that's getting sucked into the coast.
Man, I wonder if that's something they tried to do, is grapple a couple ships together, and then all of a sudden it starts to pull at the anchor and it starts drifting them. They're like, sorry, motherfuckers, we're cutting you free.
If I'm the ship with the anchor, I'm not allowing anybody to connect with me.
That's true.
I'll be damned if I'm trying to grapple onto anybody else.
Have you ever, like, if a ship has an anchor and you put it, and there's like a current or anything like that, you know how you can maybe like steer the ship and it can go out one direction, or it can go out, but it's on a pivot point. You see the ship coming toward you and it's like, throw out the grapples, catch us, and you just steer off to the other side.
Oh, we missed it. Shit. It's not any better to crash along these rocks and end up on land in Ireland, because Ireland is currently being occupied by all of these Protestant English soldiers. And even if you are lucky enough to make it on land and not die, then you are falling prey to all these English soldiers basically treating you like piñatas.
It's an old catch-22, except both catches are bad. You're either going to get popped by the English that are there, or you're going to get killed by the Irish are there so they can take your shit to then use against the English that are there. So these ships that are crashing are all these guys. And here's the thing too, that's completely crazy. If you are serving on a ship, you would think you would know how to swim or want to learn how to swim, right?
Unless you're being consigned or conscripted from the middle of Spain.
Which most of these guys are. And not only that, you're wearing fucking armor. So if you go in the water, you don't even have a chance. So it's also a storm. It's also waves crashing onto rocks. Even if you get off the boat, you're going to get crushed possibly yourself against the rocks. Anybody that ends up making it to shore, guess what? You have probably drawn a crowd of people, and they're either English or they're Irish. So you're either dead by English hands or you're dead and robbed by Irish hands as well. And there were even instances kind of on the flip side of it. There were a couple guys that were actually rebelling against the English that were there in Ireland, that were Irish. And they captured some of these Spanish guys and are basically like, we're going to keep you alive, but you're going to train us how to use these weapons that we looted from your ship, and you're going to teach us tactics. That's how you're actually going to survive. And so some of these like groups of like Irish resistance were actually using like Spanish weapons and Spanish tactics and everything. But for the most part, these guys were just, if they weren't killed by the ocean, they were killed by the locals.
Yeah, and if by some chance you ended up making it home, they said ships began to arrive in Corunna September 21st.
And Corunna is pretty far north, right?
Yeah. It's up along, I believe, the northern part of Spain. And, I mean, September 21st, you're already starting this ship at a supply deficit as far as what you're eating. These guys are just in such bad shape. They said some points they wouldn't even let them get off the ship and be in port because they were just so sick.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can do.
So it's like, it's pretty much south of it's the southern portion of the Bay of Biscay, but it's pretty much the corner, the most northwestern corner is where they had to get down to, because it made sense, because if you look at the map, they're coming all the way out around Ireland.
Yeah.
And then they're having to come straight down there. But like you said, these guys have not stepped foot on land. They've been in these cramped ships. The food is probably gone.
Yeah.
There's been disease spreading on these ships. And now that you actually make the physical journey back, they're just like, yeah, you're going to need to stay out to sea until this thing runs its course. They said like some of these ships didn't lose, they lost more to disease than they actually lost to, which is kind of commonplace, I think, in these types of like wars and everything. But the Spanish lost more to disease than they lost to the British. But just the simple fact of them being confined on these ships and sent out there is what did it.
When we talk about the death numbers, I have the disease ripped off separately just to show that this wasn't, like, losses weren't inflicted in the battle.
This is biological warfare is what this is.
Yeah. The places where the losses were sustained were trying to get home and then just being in this environment.
Yeah. It's kind of like if you were to draw a map and, take the area all the way around England and Ireland and everything like that, and marking out the shipwrecks for where, ships got sunk by the British, or I keep saying British, English Navy and all that kind of stuff. It would probably be like, oh, we're looking in the English Channel. Here's one. Here's one. Oh, we're getting closer to Calais. Boom, 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 boom. Now we're getting closer to Dunkirk. Doom, 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 doom. They go up. And then as soon as you look at the map on the west coast of Ireland, it's just boom, 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 boom of all these things that just get destroyed on the coast.
So just trying to get back, they ended up losing 28 ships and 5,000 men. Not in fighting, just fighting the wind. That was what that took.
It was a fight.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Mother Nature.
We'll start with the easier casualty count of the English. No ships lost besides the 8 sacrificed fire ships.
That's insane, right?
Crazy. But at the same time, if these ships are firing once or twice a day, and you're not in grappling range, how are they going to take out any British ships?
It's still that's what I'm saying. It's so much of an advantage for the English. They have the advantage in everything. Speed, they have the advantage. Cannon range, reloading, tactics, just the quality of the cannons. Everything came up for the English on this.
Yeah.
But to not lose a boat, that's nuts.
Oh, it's great. And that's not to say, they lost. This is the piddly numbers that are fun. They said between 50 and 100 died. There were 400 wounded. That's not a lot. It's just not a lot, especially compared to the fact that the disease deaths were between 2,000 and 3,000.
For the English, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the English alone saw 20, 30 times as much death due to disease than actual
just being
fighting.
In confined quarters, of being out to sea and everything. Even though you're close enough to sail back, you're still days at a time.
The biological warfare that's going on in these ships is just completely misunderstood. And maybe it's just because this is our first look at something on a ship. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect disease to just run rampant like that.
No. And again, that's disease. People get back on shore. People might spread it a little bit and everything. But to also say 50 to 100 dead, I just want to see the numbers and being like, okay, which of these guys dropped a cannonball on his head? Which it just workplace accidents. I wonder how many of that 50 to 100.
Yeah. Spanish side, infighting, 7 ships, 5 at Gravelanes. The other 2 was the Ducat ship, and I believe it was the Santa Maria that had run into it too. Mm-hmm. Santa Maria had a very unceremonious ending. The Santa Maria ended up exploding.
Someone just was like, nope, can't do it anymore, and took a torch down to the powder keg.
Yeah, they said the powder magazine on one end of the ship just exploded. And some of the British accounts say that that was the biggest explosion of the war, was just them accidentally lighting that on their own ship.
Did we hit that?
Yeah, no, we'll count it.
Can you imagine they fire a volley and see that explosion? I'm like, oh, shit!
God loves us. That was him. He did that. 5 were lost at Gravelanes after the fire ships and then everything running ashore. So those 5 were now French property. There were 397 men captured. There were more than 600 dead in fighting, 800 wounded, a total of 44 ships lost because we're going to add the 7 ships in fighting lost to the 28 ships. And then there were others along the way that just didn't make it. 11 to 20,000 dead total. And the 11 to 20,000 dead total comes from between 7,000 and 15,000 that died of disease.
They said there was some of these ships would hold like 400, 500 guys, which is bonkers. Because even if you look at the size of these ships, you're like, where the fuck are you putting 400 to 500 guys?
Yeah.
There was one ship that had 1,300 guys on it. Now, that was taking on survivors. That was during the, I guess you'd call it a retreat.
They still fit.
But, like, how, man?
Yeah.
And how is that ship float? 1,300? That's insane.
Yeah. Philip wasn't quite as understanding about the loss of life. I guess it was like, I think they said within the week of the last ships getting back and them totaling out, kind of knowing like if they're not back, they're either dead. Part of the thing that comes up with the total ships lost being different with the 44 compared to the 28 plus the 7 that they lost in battle, was not all of these ships were coming directly out of these ports. There were ships that had been pulled out of the Mediterranean and south below the Iberian Peninsula that were counted as lost, but more than likely they just kept going back to where they came from. Like, they were just unaccounted for in these major ports and just went right back into service.
Or went to the closest part of Spain that they possibly could, beach the ships, and everyone's like, nope, we're not doing this shit again. Captain was like, all right, everyone out. Like, if I'm going to try to keep you guys here, you guys are going to turn on me and kill me. Yeah. So I guess everyone's just done.
We're not doing this anymore.
Here's the other thing, too. Let's add into that number. We got 7,000 to 15,000 died of disease. That was in the Spanish Armada. The other half of the whole Spanish Armada, meaning the operation, was Parma's guys, who then went down to 16,000 from a much half. Let's go with the 30,000 number that you had and say half of that. That's another
14.
That's almost 30,000 dead of disease.
Yeah. To go back to Philip not really caring about this, there were so many people lost that it was like a week after that Philip forbade anybody to wear black in public as a sign of mourning for the people that were lost, because there were so many people that were wearing black in public for that first week that it
was just a walking reminder how big the failure was.
Yep. So Philip said, we will imprison you if you wear black outside. Everybody needs to move on with their lives, I guess.
And what's crazy is apparently he didn't learn, because they don't carry the same name recognition, everything, but there were more Spanish Armadas. There were more attempts to actually go after England and try to capture it again.
Yeah, there were a couple other circumstances that England may have brought some more of that on themselves. There was something called the Counter Armada that was led by Sir Francis Drake that we'll talk about when we do just the whole Anglo-Spanish War, because this all takes place in there. But kind of the quick version is Queen Elizabeth put together this counter armada that Drake was supposed to go down and finish off all of the ships that had limped back to Spain. And Drake realized that it would be more beneficial for him to go back into the shipping lanes to try to pick off some more gold and silver from the stuff coming back from the New World.
Ducats.
Yep. Elizabeth is also trying to reinstall a king back in Spain, or in Portugal, to try to crowbar that away from the Spanish Empire.
Basically, they're just like, hey, if we just cause enough shit in their own backyard, they won't have time to fuck with us.
Yeah. So it's not to say that these other armadas that came up were just another attempt. It was more escalation of Philip just being more and more angry at Elizabeth.
So you had the English counter armada, literally the next year, 1589. You then had the Spanish Armada of 1596. That's when he's seeking revenge. Sends 140 ships at that point, and that was him claiming revenge for the attack on Cadiz. Years later. It's not for like, oh, we want revenge for that first failed Spanish Armada. It was the thing that happened before that. There was then the Spanish Armada the next year of 1597. That was comprised of 136 ships and 12,000 men. And then there was the Spanish landing in Ireland, which was 1601. That was 31 or 33 ships. So even though they landed, much smaller force.
Let's try doing it on the other side. The English Channel isn't paying any dividends.
You want us to use the side that crushed all our ships? I mean, approach from the south or something.
Why are we pulling up on that beach? It's the closest beach we can. Do you not see our old wrecked ship sitting right there? We can't make it.
So what I want you to do is technically, you know how there's the English Channel where we got dog walked before. There's another channel that goes north to south between Ireland and England. You guys can just use that and then go to Ireland.
Park it in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really had no idea when we kind of were pitching ideas back and forth and you said Spanish Armada and we got into it. I thought it was like the full-blown Navy, and it is, but the Spanish Armada is just synonymous with this.
Do you think that's kind of like, they have to hate that, right?
Yeah.
That when someone says Spanish Armada, they're like, well, that's our Navy. They're like, That's not what I'm talking about.
They did so much more.
We call it the Spanish Armada, but it's basically you getting your ass kicked.
Yeah, I'm sure they have a different name for it. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some
the Enterprise of England or whatever the fuck they named it before. But yeah, when I threw that out, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, it's just going to be about, we're going to talk about South America more and how they like the area that they conquered. I'm happy it turned out to be this.
Yeah. Our first kind of full-fledged naval battle. Mm-hmm. We've been doing this a while. For this to be our full-fledged naval battle, that's kind of nuts, but it was a lot of fun kind of looking at a different style of war as opposed to, we've talked about so much on land. We've talked about war in the air. And now to be on this other battlefield where stuff is so different and it's just so erratic.
The other thing, too, is like most of our episodes, this reminds me of stuff that we may have forgotten for topics. Like I want to go back to the Habsburgs so bad. This makes me even more so knowing that they had a hand in this, trying to track that back and find out how they basically had control of basically all of mainland Europe.
Mm-hmm. We didn't mention it, but I believe there's some Medici in here too. At some point in time, the Medici family is also the ones that worked with Da Vinci. That's another family to go back to. There's just so much in here. And again, like we talked about earlier, there will be another episode. There will be a part 2. I forgot where we left off with the monarchy, but I believe we're probably into the Tudors or maybe this. I think we passed the Stuarts already.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to go through my head and say, who did we mention in another episode that wasn't the monarchy episode? Because a lot of stuff sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to get that episode knocked out. But again, this is like a little amuse-bouche for it. I don't know how tempted we're going to be to do it very soon after this because we just covered a lot of English royalty. But it'll eventually come out. I know you guys want it, but just be patient.
Yeah, we're trying.
All right, man. You got anything else on this?
No, Spanish Armada was a delicious week. Fun study.
Basically, the kind of that point in time when you can see not so much the torch being passed as far as I guess projection of power on the oceans or anything like that, but the momentum that the English use based off of this to then start establishing the empire. It's going to be fun to cover that as well when we start talking about just like the Royal Navy and everything.
Yeah, I guess another sea battle kind of episode was we hadn't even reached the golden age of piracy in this episode.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's still, it's an episode that we've already done that you can go back to, but we're talking about a time before the pirates had their golden age. This was technically the golden age of Spain. Mm-hmm. Got the golden age of pirates that's coming right after this.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this week. You guys got another long one, almost 3 hours, so yay.
Nice.
All right, we'll catch you next week.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is Historically High Pod, Historically High POD, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.